Thriller Trainee Chapter 247 to Chapter 258. Everyone was anxiously waiting with bated breath. The importance of the final battle dungeon was self-evident. In this situation where almost all the S-level players had given up and Xianxia had died, number 9 magician was the last hope. In the dark broadcast room, everyone was still discussing. If magician can't pass the tutor's assessment, doesn't that mean no one can get the universal wishing voucher? That's true, but I still hope that magician can get the final victory. It doesn't matter if he wants to make that wish or not, but I don't know if he will lose his life if he fails the test. I'm so worried. No matter what the final result is, magician must be fine. I'd rather not get the universal wishing ticket, as long as he is fine. +1, Master Xianxia's death really makes me sad. I just found out that he was a good person and now he has to face such an ending. I'm in tears. It wasn't just the broadcast room. The trainees in the studio were also worried. Everyone was worried about the difficulty of the final battle dungeon. After all, in their eyes, the test was even more difficult than the S-level 1v1 dungeon. After all, no one could guess the thoughts of the master, and no one knew what he liked. It was also because of this that magician's safety was so important to everyone. Perhaps no one would have thought that the instance dungeon, which was filled with the glint of blades and shadows of swords, and was filled with killing and bloodshed, was actually so ordinary that it was as if they were on a honeymoon. The two parties even lived leisurely in it for a year. For example, the S-level player sitting on the throne. After the 8 trigrams symbol representing Xianxia and dimmed, a few of them gathered and talked to the S-level players who were released from the control. Only then did they realize that they still retained some memories of being controlled as puppets. No, not all, but I did retain some memories. Even the most composed the dark wizard was so embarrassed that he wanted to hide in his black robe. His memories were intermittent, but there were a few that were particularly clear. For example, in the dormitory of the number 1 middle school dungeon, his bed was right below magician's. Most importantly, the dark wizard still remembered that number 1 had trapped him in the dark and narrow corner of the stairwell. On one hand, she had threatened and flirted with magician as if nothing had happened, and on the other hand, she had allowed him to watch. Xianxia was speechless. Seeing the dark wizard's expression, the blonde holy son couldn't help but feel sad. Not only did he try to fool her in the mental hospital, he even impolitely picked up a paintbrush and changed the painting that the ghost artist had drawn. After changing it, he even unceremoniously disliked the artist's drawing skills. He then took the painting away and hung it in number 1's room, admiring it every day. The most embarrassing thing was during the masquerade party. They had to form a circle and were forced to stop the crowd. They opened their mouths wide to accept the public display of affection. What was going on? Compared to them, Aizen and Poseidon were the calmest. Judging from their expressions, they were already numb. After a while, Aizen spoke. Don't worry, even if magician loses, nothing will happen to him. Xianxia and the dark sorcerers, who were well aware of this, expressed their agreement. As a bystander, they could see more clearly. At least, they had never seen the dark wizard so interested in a person. No matter how much they opposed each other, as time passed, the demon's murderous intent did indeed decrease. In the end, it quietly disappeared, never to be seen again. Although most of the people present were single dogs, how could they not have seen a pig run away? Therefore, compared to the worried Xianxia, the exorcist, and Takuman, the freed puppets were very calm. They weren't worried about the Xianxia's safety at all. Just as everyone was silent and nervously watching the still dark livestream, something unexpected happened. Originally, there were only 2 symbols left in the livestream. One was a poker card, and the other was a rose. They were close together, indicating the progress of the final dungeon. Now, the poker card's color had faded, and it was replaced by a pale gold that symbolized victory. Takuman was the first to stand up from his throne. His face was filled with obvious excitement. Magician won? Following his movement, almost all the other S-class were shocked and focused their attention on the livestream. There, the black screen suddenly lit up. The originally empty white conference room appeared on the screen. A figure gradually appeared on the throne that belonged to number 9. The final battle has ended. Winner, S-class trainee Xianxia, at the same time, almost everyone's attention was focused on the screen. The whispers and noises were put to rest. Everyone looked at the screen eagerly. When the white-haired magician finally appeared on the throne, after a moment of silence, an overwhelming wave of enthusiastic cheers erupted. It almost blew the roof of the studio off. The magician is back. He's back. He did it. The magician did it. Aha! Number 2 was stunned. His dark red eyes that had always been frozen also softened. The fingers that were clenched on the hilt quietly loosened. Takaman was so happy that he jumped on the ground and high-fived the exorcist. Everyone cheered and watched every move in the livestream. The silver-white eyelashes of the person on the throne moved slightly and he opened his eyes. His expression was cold and his eyes were firm, hiding a hidden sharpness. Congratulations on winning the final victory. Your prize, Universal Wishing Voucher X1. It has been placed at the highest place. Please go to the podium to make a wish. In front of the throne, the entire pure white conference room changed. All the white fog around it disappeared and turned into the background of the transparent studio. Magician was on the second floor. The first floor below him was filled with trainees who were looking up at him. Even the S-level throne in the studio was under his feet, showing that he was the final victor. All the lights dimmed. Only the podium at the highest place was still emitting light. It was like the only star in the dark night sky, guiding everyone who was lost. The suspended staircase gradually took shape. It rose from the front of the throne and extended to the highest place. There, a high platform surrounded by white gold and crystal arches shone brightly. Of course, the most eye-catching thing was the blank piece of paper floating above the platform. This piece of paper was only the size of a palm. It was pale gold, but everyone who saw it held their breath. That was the final prize of the Thriller Trainee competition, the Universal Wishing Voucher. Xianxia slowly stood up from the throne. There was no doubt that this was the moment that everyone was watching. Thousands of burning eyes watched his every move. They watched as he straightened his body and walked out with slow but firm steps. He walked step by step on the transparent staircase suspended in the air. This was the path of glory that belonged only to the victor. After such a long time and countless deaths, the long Thriller Trainee competition finally came to an end. It was over. It was completely over. Sobs could be heard from the crowd below. Note: wishes cannot be violated or harmed by the main system. Otherwise, the main system will revoke the wish right. As expected, just as Xianxia walked up the stairs, he received a single notification from the main system. Everything was as Zhuge had predicted. This person was despicable. Not only did he lie to him before his death, but he also kept him in suspense by saying that he knew what to do. Figuzi's divination skills were unparalleled in the world. He had hinted at the deal between the main system and the devil in front of Xianxia. It was probably to make Xianxia think about the final decision. Zhuge had predicted everything. Not only had he predicted this, but he had also predicted Xianxia's reaction. Unfortunately, he had not expected that the savior would be in cahoots with the devil. Xianxia picked up the blank wishing ticket. He was not in a hurry to write his wish on it. Instead, he confirmed it with the main system again and again. After making the wish, you will ascend to higher dimensions, right? This was the most crucial moment. The energy that the main system had collected over the years had been accumulated. Only this last wish was left. The deal with the devil had been going well, but at the last moment, the devil had given up the victory. Fortunately, the main system did not have human emotions. Otherwise, he would have been angered to death. Yes. The main system did not pretend to be dead. Instead, it responded cautiously. As long as the wish is not too excessive, it can be fulfilled for you. After receiving a definite answer, Xianxia's eyes flashed with deep thought. He finally reached out and picked up the blank wishing ticket. Main system. Let's make a deal. You want to ascend to higher dimensions, and the key to this is in my hands, isn't it? The white-haired magician's tone was calm, but anyone could hear the threat in his voice. Number 1 has transferred the authority to me. He can't do anything to me, and Xianxia paused for a moment. His words were watertight. But I can give up on him without hesitation. Xianxia was betting. He was betting on a possibility. It was as if there was a balance in front of him and the main system. Both sides were weighing their chips. The main system's chip was the devil. Unfortunately, this unreliable partner had abandoned him at the last moment and caused him to suffer. Xianxia's chip was this wishing ticket that only he could make a wish. It was also the devil's attitude towards him. Because both he and the main system knew that the devil would never do anything to Xianxia. Never. Without a doubt, this was very dangerous. If he was not careful, or if the main system did not care about ascending to higher dimensions, Xianxia might be killed on the spot, just like Guguzi. But he still did it. Because this was something that had to be done. There were too many people who placed their hopes on him. If you miss this opportunity, you don't know how long you'll have to wait. Magician deliberated over his words, persuading him patiently. Don't worry, my request isn't too much. It's just as easy for you. As if to express his determination, Xianxia raised his hand and everyone quieted down. Under the spotlight, countless people looked up at him. I've received it. The white-haired youth waved the wishing ticket in his hand. Under the light from the ceiling, his pupils appeared to be a light color that seemed to be flickering with light. It was a breathtaking sight. Many people might think that I was joking. That's right. Before I came to this position, I thought I was joking too. After all, who wouldn't wish for themselves after receiving the wishing ticket and wish for the destruction of the infinite loop? The people in the live broadcast room were excited. An explosion of messages flooded the screen. Wait. What is Magician doing? Oh my God, is he really going to make this wish? Is he really going to destroy the infinite loop? If he destroys the infinite loop, will we be able to leave? No way, I always thought he was joking. Even when you guys said that Magician was a good person, I thought he was just joking. I didn't expect it to be true. It shocked my entire family. Oh my God, I'm speechless. You didn't hear wrongly. Xianxia waited for the system's reply. He continued to add to the situation and decided to take the next step. System, do you still remember Guguzi? As expected, the main system's hesitation when he mentioned the Abyss Devils was completely shaken after hearing Guguzi's name. Perhaps it knew that Magician was the same as the devil. They were variables that couldn't be controlled. If he was forced into a corner, he could do anything. Don't negotiate with a lunatic, especially when the lunatic is fearless. After a long while, the cold mechanical voice sounded reluctantly. At the same time, Xianxia finally revealed a faint smile. Zhuge and said that everything was unpredictable. But this guy who claimed that wise men don't fall in love definitely didn't know this because Zhuge and never thought that the devil would compromise. Xianxia never played by the rules and was terrifyingly greedy. He could use everything he had to negotiate with the system, including his own life. The system didn't dare to gamble with him. While everyone who has been lost can return to you, I also hope that everyone can retain the right to leave this place. That is my wish. Not only the live broadcast room, but the entire studio was also in an uproar because of his announcement. Someone started to clap in the midst of the cheers. Gradually, the applause sounded like thunder, wave after wave, never stopping. They hugged each other with tears streaming down their faces as they shouted Magician's name. They didn't care that their voices were hoarse from all the shouting. Susu also cried when she heard that the people she had lost would return. The winner's wish disappeared into the blank wishing ticket. Soon, whether it was the survivors in the infinite loop or the trainees in the studio, they all received a notification from the system. A few short lines of words appeared in everyone's vision. Do you wish to leave the infinite loop? Yes/no. It was hard to describe the ecstasy of the collective. People bowed and took off their hats. Some even knelt on the ground and worshipped incoherently. Xianxia only smiled and waved at them, like a qualified savior. Even though he knew that the real savior wasn't him. Thinking of this, Xianxia felt like laughing again. He was looking forward to Zhuge An's expression when he came back to life. He would be so shocked that he wouldn't be able to speak. Even Guiguzi, the scheming bastard, hadn't been able to predict this, but he had. Magicians were supposed to create miracles, weren't they? More and more people pressed the button to leave the infinite loop without hesitation. Rays of white light flashed one after another. Figures disappeared with the white light. In the distance, the S-class greeted him from afar. Fanjue gave him a relaxed smile. Takaman jumped and waved at him. The exorcist whistled. Messiah still smiled gently. The dark wizard and Aizen also bowed to him. The yin-yang master shouted at the top of his lungs, "You did it. When you return to the real world, you must come and drink with us." The white-haired magician, who was standing at the highest point, made an okay gesture and watched them turn into white light and leave. There were fewer and fewer people in the studio. The number of people online in the broadcast room also decreased sharply. At the same time, the entire structure of the trainees' dormitory in the spatial rift began to change. The dark red carpet was gradually covered by an indiscernible color. The surrounding sunlight, windows, and ocean disappeared at the same time. The only thing left in the entire space was the floating staircase and the podium at the highest point. It was like the only light left. After the trainees returned to the real world, this temporary space opened up by the main system also returned to its original state. The main system had no time to care about this. When it fulfilled Zhongjiu's wish, it also received a feedback of willpower. This enormous willpower carried it toward a higher dimension and opened a higher dimensional passage. Of course, it couldn't pay attention to this. Since the main system's goal had been achieved, the infinite loop would be under the control of number one. As for the trainees and survivors, whether they lived or died, it had nothing to do with it. This space was collapsing. If they didn't do anything, they would be transferred to the infinite loop. Of course, no one chose to stay. Zhongjiu didn't move. He still stood in the same place. He was waiting for someone. Finally, when the magician was the only one left in the studio, someone hugged him from behind. It was an ice-cold hug. Even the weight of the white-haired youth's shoulder was unbelievably familiar. The demon didn't speak. He just hugged the magician. For a long time, he even wanted to keep hugging him like this. After a long time, when the stairs began to crumble and the platform beneath their feet became unstable, a muffled voice came from behind him. "Are you leaving?" It was a very short sentence. There was no urge to stay. There was nothing else. It was just a simple question, as if asking if he had eaten yet. But the hand around the magician tightened. It was so tight that he couldn't breathe. He couldn't break free. The demon didn't say anything, but his body language conveyed the same meaning. "Don't go. Don't go. Don't go." Zhongjiu didn't answer him immediately. Or rather, he didn't know how to answer. He wanted to ask the demon. He was such an emotionless, indifferent, cold-blooded existence. He might never be able to give the demon the same kind of passionate love in his entire life. Even so. Did he still choose him? But when it came to this, he couldn't ask. Or rather, Zhongjiu realized that he didn't need to ask anymore. Because the moment the teleportation request popped up, Zhongjiu had rejected it. Clean and direct, without any hesitation. When did it start? He had silently allowed the demon to enter his life. He had lost his memory but still trusted him unconsciously. Or he had brought him to his elders' graves. Or even earlier, in the dormitory after the masquerade party, he had taken the initiative to kiss him. Zhongjiu laughed silently. He had made his choice long ago. That's right, they were mortal enemies. He could easily stir up the other's boiling blood and drag the other into the fire. Even feelings and love might have sprouted at the same time. One was passionate, the other was cold, that was all. He turned around and removed his gloves skillfully. He put a ring on the black hair. A ring with roses wrapped around it. Surprised? Zhongjiu smiled slyly. "I'm a magician." After everything was done, he answered solemnly. "I'm not leaving." He wouldn't leave. Everyone had left, but he wouldn't leave either. The magician didn't like the real world. He preferred an infinite loop and a bad guy made of evil intentions. "I owe you too many times, I can't repay you. Is it enough to stay with you?" Everyone had left, and the devil was all alone in this world. But if there was someone to accompany him, as long as it was a person, he would only want this person. Before he could finish, a cold kiss drowned out the magician's words. At the same time, the stairs and platform shattered. The background turned into a starry sky covered with black curtains. Thousands of fragments of the world spun around them, reflecting the light of the stars and illuminating everything. In the shattered world, they kissed and held each other tightly. They fell in each other's arms in the darkness and light fragments. It was romantic, like lovers committing suicide in the starry sky. The demon was laughing, his chest vibrating with joy and joy. He knew that if he desired something, he had to be free. But if he returned to you, he would belong to you forever. The demon grabbed his roses. He had made the right bet. Yu Yuan felt as if he had just had a very long dream. In the dream, he wasn't called this name. Someone seemed to call him something like Takaman, saying that he had inherited this glorious surname. While gaining strength, he might also lose some insignificant luck. Yu Yuan was confused, but in the dream, he immediately responded with an and ah. In his heart, he thought that this was a strange name. Who would have the surname too? It would be more likely to have the surname Run. He couldn't remember exactly what this dream was about. He only remembered that after waking up, he felt a sense of loss and unconsciously sad. Of course, there was also excitement and agitation. This feeling of happiness lasted for a long time, so long that when he woke up and realized that he still had to go to the company to type code, he was still in a good mood. Even these boring and monotonous lines of code couldn't make Yu Yuan feel any pain. Instead, he had an inexplicable smile on his face, and the speed at which he typed the code became much faster. In just a short while, the huge workload was about to be completed. Hey, you're in a good mood today, aren't you? Coincidentally, a similarly bald programmer was passing by with a cup of tea. When he walked to Yu Yuan's side, he suddenly tripped over a table leg, and the cup of tea suddenly fell forward. Coincidentally, it fell right on the circuit board. Thus, the computer screen in front of Yu Yuan flickered and fell into darkness. Yu Yuan, who was about to finish his work for the day, was speechless. The smile that was still on his face a moment ago immediately collapsed. What's going on? I couldn't walk properly, and my eyes were playing tricks on me. The programmer hurriedly brought over a rag and wiped him clean. He also asked the others to turn off the power switch in this area, repeatedly apologizing. Since he was like this, Yu Yuan couldn't say anything, and could only attribute the accident to his recent bad luck. Speaking of this, Yu Yuan had a topic to talk about. Because he was really unlucky recently. He didn't know what kind of deity he had offended. Even when he was walking and drinking cold water, he couldn't help but want to stuff his teeth. Needless to say, it was miserable. He had clearly won the third prize in the lottery last year. Could it be that after that lottery, he had used up all his good luck? Thinking of this, Yu Yuan was a little frightened. Little you go and rest first. Leave this to me, ahahaha. The programmer smiled apologetically. Thinking about the code he had just seen, he felt particularly embarrassed. He just didn't know if it could be preserved after the power was cut off. If it couldn't be preserved, he would have to start all over again. Yu Yuan nodded and didn't say anything. He first sat in front of a computer in another area and stared at the screen in a daze. While he was in a daze, a small advertisement suddenly popped up at the bottom right corner of the screen. Do you want to draw SSR cards 10 times in a row? Welcome to the world of Onmyoji. That was not enough for the small advertisement. It even included an advertisement. The advertisement showed a Yin-Yang master in hunting attire standing in front of a vermilion torii. His hands were clasped together, and a light blue six-pointed star Kikyo was spinning on his palm. Yu Yuan had nothing to do at first, and was dejectedly mourning his lost code. However, when he saw this advertisement, he immediately became spirited. There was something wrong with this advertisement. Which Yin-Yang master would use such a hand gesture? Yu Yuan slapped the table and stood up. Only after he stood up did he realize what he was thinking. Wait, that's not right. He had never seen a Yin-Yang master make a seal before, so how could he be so sure that someone else's seal was wrong? He sat down in bewilderment and turned off the small advertisement. Who would have thought that right after he turned off the advertisement, another web page would pop up? Yu Yuan was speechless. It was an old trick when placing advertisements. There were a total of 3 buttons to turn off the advertisement. If you didn't have a sharp eye, you wouldn't know which one to press to turn it off completely. Just as he was about to turn off the advertisement and continue his coding career, the new advertisement that popped up caused his pupils to contract. The world's first holographic game released, Infinite Loop Adventure. The game will begin beta testing this afternoon. Those who are interested can click on the link below to apply for a holographic helmet. If your application is approved, you can immediately try it out for free. For some reason, Yu Yuan clicked on the link. On the other side of the room, Su, who was silently turning off the web page in his room, also came back to his senses. He turned off the holographic game, and the application page popped up. He turned around and knocked himself on the head. Su had been acting strangely for the past few days. Originally, he was still sulking because of his family's nagging, but for some reason these days, he didn't sit in front of the computer all day long. Instead, he often helped out with the housework, cleaned the house, and even massaged his family members' backs. Even Su didn't know what was wrong with him. For example, when he saw the news about the holographic game, he rushed into the web page before he could react. He filled in his ID number according to the requirements, and only after the application was completed did he realize what he had done. What if he encountered illegal websites? Su wailed in his heart. He took another look at the motionless web page and finally stood up from the computer desktop. Just as he stood up, the web page suddenly refreshed. This time, the application submitted in the middle suddenly turned into the words approved. There was even a small line of words below: the express delivery has been delivered, please check. What the hell? Su was puzzled. When he was about to take a screenshot and report it to the internet police, there was a sudden rush of a courier knocking on the door. After the door was closed, his mother's voice came down the corridor. Su, come out, there's a courier for you that just signed. Huh? Courier, what courier? Su took a picture and responded, I didn't buy a courier. I don't know, it looks like a helmet? Why, are you going to learn how to ride a bike? After hearing the word helmet, Su was so shocked that he didn't even hold his phone tightly. It fell to the ground with a clang. He stared at the words the express delivery has been delivered on the web page in disbelief and rushed out. Damn it, it really came. On the outside, there were a few big words printed on the tightly packed delivery box. Holographic game, Infinite Loop Adventure. At this time, it was night on the other side of the ocean. On the top floor of a transparent glass building, someone stood in front of a huge floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the bright lights and busy traffic below. This was undoubtedly the financial center. There was no building taller than this building in the entire city. As far as the eye could see, there was only a deep black ocean in the distance. On the desk was a black helmet that had just been taken apart. In the silence, someone finally knocked on the door. Knock, knock, knock. Come in. The man in the office said concisely and didn't look back. The private secretary came in with a folder in his hand and bowed. He stood respectfully and reported. I just received a call, there was no news about young Master Zong. The young master mentioned by the secretary referred to another family's young master. That young master surnamed Zong had always been the apple of their eye, the apple of their eye, the apple of their eye, the apple of their eye. It was said that he was usually arrogant and domineering. Normally, the secretary wouldn't even spare a glance at such a pampered young master. However, it just so happened that this young Master Zong and their superior were once engaged. The two of them were childhood sweethearts and had known each other since a long time ago. In the end, for some unknown reason, about a few days ago, that young master suddenly announced that he had gone missing. No one found anything unusual. It was said that he disappeared from his home without a trace. The surveillance in the villa didn't capture anything. It could be said that he disappeared from the face of the earth. This matter was strange. That family seemed to be very good to this young master, but when he really went missing, they just searched for him and didn't even report it to the police. Moreover, it seemed that many people in the family had forgotten about the existence of this young master. This was only discovered after careful investigation. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to find out so much. It seemed that everyone had naturally forgotten about that young master. The gray-haired man nodded. You go to work first. You've worked hard. After the secretary left, he turned around and focused his gaze on the helmet on the desk. Before, he had been suspicious, but now, he was sure that he had indeed forgotten something. As for what he had forgotten, he could only find it through this helmet. Speaking of which, it was true. If it were any other time, he wouldn't even look at things related to games. But now, he didn't know why, but after accidentally seeing the game advertisement, he couldn't wait to buy it back. The man picked up the helmet and put it on his head. After a moment of dizziness, a text box appeared in front of his eyes. Welcome to the world's first holographic game, Infinite Loop Adventure. Congratulations on being selected as a respected beta tester. Please use your mind to enter your custom username. Note, the user's name will be your game name. He frowned. Just as he was about to choose a name, the text box appeared again. Please wait a moment. Detected that you have previously created a character. The character is currently loading. Character name, Xianxia. In less than a second, a projection of the same height appeared in front of Xianxia. Other than the dark red pupils, the black gold military uniform he wore, and the military knife at his waist, everything else was exactly the same as in reality. Strangely, although Xianxia was sure that he had never come into contact with or played this game, he felt a heartfelt familiarity with the projection in front of him. It was as if he had been dressed like this before. But Xianxia had a premonition. All of his questions could be answered in this game. At the same time, in the entire world, about 100 people successfully passed the first round of applications for this mysterious holographic game and became the respected first batch of beta testers. Other than that, thousands of people rushed to submit their applications. Strangely enough, these people seemed to have been inspired. Regardless of whether they were normally interested in games or not, they all filled in their ID numbers and real names on the website as if they were possessed. Including the express delivery that appeared immediately after the application, no one noticed anything wrong. After a dazzling light, everyone wearing the holographic helmet felt as if something was vaguely appearing in front of their eyes. The first thing that appeared was a large patch of solidified color, as if glued together. The strange thing was that these colors were so familiar. At least for the first batch of 100 people who passed the review and were allowed to enter the game, an indescribable feeling rose in everyone's heart. A little sad, a little scared, but also a strange expectation. Perhaps everyone knew in their hearts that this was just a holographic game. So with this thought, the fear that rose for some reason began to gradually fall back to its original place. After this, everyone finally came back to their senses and began to look at the people around them. The space where the color patches had solidified was already full of people. No more, no less, just 100 people. Strangely enough, as far as the eye could see, everyone was dressed differently. Some were wearing ordinary t-shirts, some were wearing evening gowns, and some were even wearing bandages and military uniforms. There were so many strange outfits that people were dazzled. Those who didn't know would think that they had mistakenly entered a cosplay scene. Not only that, after these people looked around, they actually felt that the faces around them were vaguely familiar. But the problem was that everyone knew very well that they definitely didn't know each other. Forget about knowing each other, they had never even seen each other before. But they clearly felt that they were familiar. Yu Yuan, oh, now he should be called Takaman, stuck his head out and looked down at the exclusive Onmyoji hunting suit on his body. He felt that this suit really suited his temperament. Just as he tried to intertwine his hands together and form a seal in the air, he saw a spinning hexagram appear in the air. Tsuchimikado's mouth widened into an O shape. F*CK, little brother, you're something. You figured out how to use it so quickly. The person standing next to him just happened to see it and immediately reached out his hand. Come, let's be friends? Takaman skillfully reached out his hand. Okay. He didn't know how many games he had played, but of course he knew that the most important thing in this kind of online game was networking. Don't be fooled by the fact that Tsuchimikado was usually a bald programmer. He had two faces on the internet and was definitely a social media expert. However, when he turned around, he realized that this person's face looked rather familiar. The game ID was even more familiar. It was called The Exorcist. Strange. Why do I feel like I know you? The exorcist stared at the hexagram in his hand for a while and suddenly realized, so you're a yin-yang master. Not bad, a very awesome support class. You're the support. Us on Myojus are a class that kills everything in our path. Takaman rolled his eyes subconsciously. What kind of exorcist are you? You don't even have a weapon. Don't tell me you're going to fight with holy water? What holy water? We have real weapons. With that, the exorcist took out a gun from behind him. Takaman. Good heavens, could this be the legendary physical expiation? He was filled with deep veneration. Just as they were whispering to each other, the rest of the people seemed to have suddenly opened a chatterbox and soon began to chat with each other. It was strange. Everyone was not the kind of person who could easily get familiar with strangers. However, among these 100 people, everyone could see eye to eye with each other as if they had known each other for a long time. Just as they were chattering, suddenly, a mechanical voice sounded in everyone's ears. Wait, this voice. The strange thing was, everyone felt that this voice was indescribably strange. They subconsciously felt that this mechanical voice should be colder. Game loading complete. Welcome to the holographic game, Infinite Looping Adventure, as a new holographic game without any promotional materials, and even the game content was mysterious to the point that it was not announced. This game undoubtedly whetted everyone's appetite. Generally speaking, according to traditional online games, after entering, they would first create a character, create a face, and so on. However, this game was different. It directly created a character for them. All of a sudden, the solidified color blocks all began to move and gradually began to transform into different things. Almost in a moment, the original barren land was all gone. They stood in front of a green grassland, surrounded by leaves that were blown by the wind. Further away, the black forest that was so dense that no light could be seen stood in the distance. At the end of the forest, a majestic grayish-black steel castle stood at the top of a cliff. The cross was still stained with blood, and vultures were circling in the sky. It was a daunting sight. The fiery red sunset hung in the sky, reflecting on the sea, beautiful like a decadent oil painting. Welcome to the closed beta dungeon, pre-storyline loading. Please wait, a banquet is being held in the Black King's castle. You are guests invited by the Honorable Light Wizards. The wizards have told you to follow your heart and enter the Black Forest. The forest and the dead will guide you. Guests who successfully reach the banquet will receive a closed beta exclusive reward. Because this is a closed beta dungeon, the game will only end after sunrise. If you give up halfway, just call out the system and quit the game. There will be no punishment. After hearing that there would be no punishment, many people subconsciously let out a sigh of relief. There was a strange feeling. If there was a punishment in this game, it would be terrible. Fortunately, this was just a game. But after that, some people were confused. Wait. That's it? Why isn't there a beginner's guide or an introduction to the game? Yeah, we're still confused after coming in. I just saw that person make a small fireball. Why can't I do it after chanting the spell? That's weird. There's not even a storyline or an NPC. How are we going to play? Yeah, and the system just said that it's a dungeon. Are we going to enter the dungeon directly? Just as everyone was discussing animatedly, a voice full of energy rang out. Ahahaha, this is just a closed beta game. It's probably not fully developed yet. Don't be so nervous. We're mainly here to look at the graphics and gameplay. It's normal for it to be simple. The exorcist looked at the invitation letter in his hand and waved to the people beside him. So, is there anyone who wants to team up? There's strength in numbers. Why don't we split into a few groups and enter the dungeon together? His call attracted the attention of many people. A few people in the crowd raised their hands silently, or walked directly toward him and sent him friend requests. The exorcist responded as he hurriedly began to pass these applications. The strange thing was that these IDs also looked very familiar. ID, Messiah, ID, The Dark Wizard, ID, Azen in Black, ID, Poseidon, ID, Xianxia. The exorcist instinctively added these IDs to his team. It's full, it's full. Our team of 7 is just right. The rest of you, please form another team. Sorry. The others saw that their team was full and also formed a team. Only Susu stared blankly at the black forest. He did not greet anyone and walked toward the forest alone as if he was possessed. There were many people now, and everyone was busy with their own things. No one noticed this scene. Come. Shall we report our positions? I'll go first. I'm a tank. I can support and have a lot of health. Messiah raised her hand. I'm a healer. Hey. There was a healer in the team. Those who had played online games knew that healers were indispensable in dungeons. Healers were also the rarest of all. Wasn't it great that they had picked up such a precious profession? After an exciting start, the self-introductions became smoother and smoother. After organizing everything, the exorcist realized that their impromptu team actually had long-range damage dealers, melee damage dealers, tanks, and healers. They even had summoners and taunters. Good fellow, we've picked up a treasure. He muttered and scratched his head. Is there anyone in our team who's good at commanding? I'm better at livening up the atmosphere. I'm not good at commanding. I'll do it. Xianxia nodded. Everyone, just listen to my commands when we enter the Black Forest. Everything was in order. Everyone took their positions. At this moment, someone suddenly exclaimed, "Damn, there's a weapon in my backpack?" What? Backpack? Everyone looked at each other and opened their backpacks at the same time. This game had given them too many mysteries. Not only was there a holographic helmet that was sent to them after filling out the form, but there were also characters that were created after they started the game. Now, not only did each character come with different skills, but they also came with their own starting equipment. Good fellow, wasn't this like opening a blind box? Everyone realized the familiarity in their minds and felt that they were getting closer and closer to the truth. The closed beta dungeon will officially open in 3 seconds. All players, please pay attention. 3, 2, 1. The dungeon has been opened. At this moment, the strange mechanical voice appeared again. But soon, the players didn't have the energy to pay attention to this. After the countdown ended, everything around him seemed to come alive, as if it was dyed with a layer of vitality. The grass began to sway. The sun was about to set. The earth was about to fall into darkness. There were no other sources of light on the grassland except for the Black Castle. The players began to rummage through their backpacks in a flurry to see if they were lucky enough to find a lighting item. At this moment, an anxious voice suddenly sounded. Oh no, we won't make it in time for the Black King's banquet. Everyone took a closer look and saw a rabbit in a tuxedo hurriedly walking past. As he walked, he took out a gold pocket watch from his waist and mumbled to himself. He seemed to be in a hurry. This is His Majesty's wedding. If we're late, we'll be beheaded. Everyone looked at each other. Wedding? What wedding? Takaman said, isn't this the plot of Alice in Wonderland? He was about to ask the rabbit NPC that appeared first when he heard a cheerful noise in the distance. A joker with a face covered in paint was holding a string of balloons and running toward them. The sudden appearance of the joker was a horrifying sight. Not only was his face painted with colorful paint, but his body was decorated with sticky blood instead of red paint. Even the red balloons and the unknown stains on the balloons looked out of place in this fairy tale-like world. There was no doubt that he was also an NPC. The players looked at each other, hesitating whether they should go up and ask for information. But after seeing the Joker's outfit, most of them could not move. Instead, they chased after the rabbit NPC who was bouncing into the Black Forest. The exorcists looked at each other and saw the willingness to take a risk in each other's eyes. Before they could finish making eye contact, Xianxia, who did not participate in eye contact at all, stepped forward and walked toward the Joker. Sure enough, everyone had the same idea. The others did not hesitate and chose to approach the Joker, who seemed to be in a good mood, to talk to him. Oh, are you looking for me? Normally, the lonely clown would be more than happy to offer his help, as he was rarely bothered by anyone. But the Joker is busy now. He has to go to the Black King's castle to hold a stage for a special performance. The Joker kicked the ground. My old friend Mad Hatter and my best friend are still waiting for me. I can't be too late. There was too much information in this sentence, but overall, the Joker sounded quite friendly. Oh. Wait. Just as the Joker was about to turn around and leave, he suddenly looked at the people in front of him and made a strange sound. So it's you. I remember you. What did that mean? Did he mean that he knew them? The team was a little confused because everyone was sure that they did not know the Joker in front of them. Go forward. As long as you pass through the Black Forest, you will reach the castle. The Joker kindly gave each of them a balloon. Of course, the forest at night is always full of danger. Maybe you will see some old friends in there? Hurry up, you're the only guests left for the wedding. After saying that, the clown did not stay any longer. Instead, he danced a strange dance that he and the Mad Hatter had choreographed together and skipped toward the dark forest, leaving the 7 players who did not know what was going on and were still holding on to the balloon rope. Get ready to move. Xianxia glanced at the castle in the distance. It was a little strange. Before the sun had set, he instinctively felt very uncomfortable when the sunlight shone on his body. But now, the sun was setting and the earth was plunged into darkness. Instead, he felt that this pitch-black environment was relaxing all the pores on his body, making him feel unbelievably comfortable. Even though there was no light in this patch of grass and forest, Xianxia could easily see the appearance of the dark world in the distance. Takuman looked around and saw this scene. He exclaimed, "Wow, why are your eyes red?" The man in military uniform lowered his head and touched his eyes without saying a word. On the other hand, the exorcist at the side stood up and waved his hand. It's normal, it's normal. This game probably creates characters and assigns backpacks through blind selection. Have you guys played online games before? Since there are different talents, there are also different races. Take me for example. My profession is my ID, exorcist. As for this brother's class, let me guess, night vision, red eyes, open your mouth and look. Oh, you have sharp teeth too. Also, you have my unique perception as an exorcist. Good lad, this is the vampire race. Awesome. Everyone in the team nodded in realization. It was also during this interruption that they successfully arrived at the entrance of the Black Forest. Standing at the entrance of the forest and looking inside, the surrounding trees were tall, rising from the ground and blocking out the sun. The sky was pitch black, and there was no moonlight. The surroundings were eerily silent, and only the withered trees could be seen baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. There were many different roads marked here, and in combination with the low shrubs, each road seemed to be heading in the same direction, but no one knew what they would encounter along the way. Seeing this scene, Messiah said with some hesitation, "This isn't a horror game, right?" The Joker, who had just appeared, gave them a strong sense of contrast. Originally, when the plot was introduced, everyone thought that this was a simple role-playing adventure game, similar to the famous Legend of Zelda in Nintendo. But as soon as the Joker appeared, the style of the game uncontrollably moved toward horror games. It shouldn't be. Takuman, who had been immersed in games for many years, touched his head. It's a holographic game, and not a worldview. It's unlikely that it's just a horror game. As soon as he finished speaking, a swarm of black bats flapped their wings and swept over from the Black Forest. A red blood moon appeared from the black clouds, and the atmosphere was immediately filled with horror. Everyone was speechless. Don't think about it, let's go. Seeing that they had been performing crosstalk at the entrance of the Black Forest for so long, the Dark Wizard was the first to speak. Didn't the system say that the closed beta server will automatically shut down when the sun rises? Hearing this, everyone stopped chatting. They quickly called for their teams and randomly picked a path to enter. This was only a closed beta game, but whether it was the character modeling or the scenery, it was no different from reality. Nearly 100 players saw it for themselves, and they praised it along the way. Especially an old gamer like Tu Yiman, his heart was clear. It was no exaggeration to say that if this infinite looping adventure opened beta and was fully launched, it would definitely take the world by storm and start a new gaming era. In short, at this moment, whether they liked to play games or not, they seemed to have been inexplicably guided into the depths of the forest. These days, they were a little muddle-headed in reality. It could not be said that they were not mentally strong, nor could it be any other reason. It was as if they had forgotten something very important, and their hearts were empty. Many people woke up in the middle of the night and found that they were covered in cold sweat, wet and sticking to their backs. They wanted to recall, but they could not remember the content of the dream. They only remembered that it was a story full of fear, death, sadness, and tears, but there was no lack of warmth and passion. Just like the mechanical voice at the beginning said, if they could go to the castle, they might be able to understand the reason. Everyone carried this hope and followed their teammates into the forest. Just as they entered the forest, the forked roads around them all disappeared. Instead, there was a small path that meandered into the distance. No one realized that something was wrong. They surrounded the healer and support in the middle, and those with high defense stood on the periphery, escorting the damage dealers step by step as they explored the forest. The deeper they went into the forest, the narrower the path became, and the quieter the surroundings became. It was so quiet that not a sound could be heard. That's not right. Why is there not even a sound? The black-clothed Azan held the soul-summoning banner in his hand and looked around vigilantly. I also want to ask, don't normal games require you to level up and kill monsters? Where are the monsters? Takaman scratched his head in confusion. The next second, a strand of black hair swept across the back of his neck. The Yin-Yang master suddenly jumped and looked up. Above his head, there was nothing. But for some reason, Takaman's intuition told him that an old acquaintance seemed to have come looking for him. But if you had to ask him to say what an old acquaintance was, he couldn't quite say. About 10 minutes later, everyone realized that they were too sweet. This was a serious horror game. After experiencing the dance of demons and being chased by ghosts, everyone was numb. Takaman held a yin-yang talisman and hid under a tree, trembling. Beside him, Messiah nervously tightened her grip on the staff in her hand. They were avoiding the pursuit of a female ghost. This female ghost claimed that one of them was unfaithful and had forgotten her name. So, in an instant, black hair fell from a height of 3,000 feet, falling all the way to the top of their heads. In the next second, it would wrap around their necks and the game would be over. Fortunately, the 7 people present had good mental fortitude. They weren't scared to the point of immediately cutting off the connection when they saw a ghost. In fact, even though the first batch of beta testers were all shocked when they saw the ghost, none of them were scared to the point of quitting the game. That was a testament to their mental fortitude. The exorcist frowned. That female ghost seems to be looking for someone. Do any of you know her real name? Everyone's faces showed undisguised confusion. Only Takaman grabbed his hair and muttered to himself, why do I feel like I remember her? Of course, Takaman couldn't remember after losing his memory. But if it was before Takaman lost his memory, he would most likely be so scared that he would jump up from the ground. Back then, Takaman had a fortuitous encounter in the S-level instance dungeon 100 Ghosts Parade and was fortunate enough to inherit the Yin-Yang master's skills. The 100 Ghosts Parade dungeon was extremely difficult. Many seniors had died in it. But Takaman was lucky enough to gain the favor of a ghost king. She escorted him all the way to the Onmyoji's inheritance and instantly turned it into a vacation dungeon. It was laughable. By the way, that ghost king was a girl. She was the one who had her hair down and was carelessly combing her hair from a high place. Takaman pressed his head. A terrifying face flashed through his hazy memory. She held a pipe in her hand and blew at him. I've told you my name. You have to remember it well. If you forget. Hee. After becoming Onmyoji, Takaman had a new understanding of names. Especially for ghosts, the importance of a real name was self-evident. Powerful Onmyojis could even summon ghosts and make them their spirit-branded retainers. The Ghost King told him her name. It was hard to say if she wanted to become Takaman's spirit-branded retainer. But Takaman. He was afraid of ghosts. He was very, very afraid. After becoming Onmyoji, he never opened his yin-yang eye. He didn't take in any spirit-branded retainers at all. He would rather cut his own paper than summon a powerful fighter. But the current situation was a little awkward. If he couldn't remember, he wouldn't even be able to pass the first stage of this dungeon. Takaman squatted on the ground. While he felt a headache, he also felt something wrap around his body from the top of his head. With a shiver, he remembered everything. Although he hadn't recovered any memories of the infinite loop, at least he didn't die here. It was a good thing. The Onmyoji jumped up from the ground. Tsuehua. I remember now. Fujiwara Tsuehua. Everyone. They slowly typed out a question mark. On the other side, Susu was the first to step into the black forest as if he was possessed. When he completely woke up, he realized that he was in a forest with no end in sight. Susu was shocked and subconsciously wanted to go back. But when he looked back, he found that the path he came from was already covered by dense bushes. As long as he showed any intention of going back, the leaves surrounded him as if they had eyes and blocked his back, not allowing him to turn back. He had no choice but to bite the bullet and walk forward. Just as Susu was about to take a step forward, a voice suddenly rang in his ears. Open your backpack and take out the item. This voice wasn't the voice from the system notification, but a young man's voice. Susu was very sure that he had never heard this voice before. But for some reason, the moment this voice sounded, he froze on the spot and couldn't stop crying. In this quiet black forest, Susu stood in place and wept. Her tears surged forth and could not be stopped. He didn't know what was wrong with him. He was sure that he had never heard this voice before, but the familiar feeling in his mind became stronger and stronger. His tears also became more and more turbulent. He couldn't stop them at all. There was a forgotten name hidden at the tip of his tongue. He couldn't say it, but Susu clearly knew that the owner of this voice was very important to him, very, very important. It was like, a part of him was missing. For so many days, Susu didn't know how to live at home. In the past, Susu's life was very rich and colorful. He sat at home and casually played games every day. Occasionally, when he was in a good mood, he would ask his buddies out to play basketball or arcade games. In short, he didn't let himself be bored. But now, Susu was sitting in front of his desk. The day passed quietly just like that. He didn't know what he had done at all. He was muddle-headed, like a walking corpse. His thoughts seemed to have frozen, and he didn't think or do anything. His family said that he had grown up and become calm and reliable. He had changed from the young man who didn't think about anything in the past to a sensible man. Only Susu knew that he seemed to be missing something. It was as if his heart had been dug out. He was sad for no reason, but he didn't know what he was sad about. After hearing this sound, the NZWNJ instantly seemed to become a complete NZWNJ. He thought he must have forgotten that NZWNJ was a very important person. Seeing that he was crying so hard that he was out of breath, the voice became gentler. Don't cry. Hearing the man's words, Susu cried even louder. It was as if he wanted to cry out all the grievances that he had been forced to forget. He sobbed and said, unless you tell me your name. I won't cry. The voice was a little helpless. I want to tell you, but that's against the rules. If possible, Susan would have preferred to appear directly. But no, the rules still didn't allow it. Even if the main system had gone to the higher dimension, this space was no longer under the control of the main system. The highest authority had been handed over to the demons, and the infinite loop still had its own rules. It was impossible for that lord to be so kind as to do charity. Therefore, the rules that should be obeyed cannot be violated. Fortunately, things were much better than before. For example, the game that appeared out of nowhere was the best proof. His voice paused again. Follow my instructions and get out of this forest first. Be good, don't stay here for too long. It's dangerous here. Hearing the word obedient, Susu's face suddenly turned red, and her tears stopped immediately. He wiped his red eyes and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, okay, I'll listen to you. After saying that, Susu hurriedly lowered her head, not daring to raise it. Just like that, she hurriedly walked forward with a red face. On the other side. As expected, Takaman was taught a lesson by the ghost sister. Why? Of course, it was because he remembered the ghost sister's name wrongly. The ghost sister's full name was Fujiwara Haruko, and her nickname was Chuehua. In the end, he didn't remember her full name, but he remembered the small name clearly. He even shouted it out in front of so many people. Did the ghost sister not want to lose face? Thus, the yin-yang master was lifted up and down by the black hair. The magic of love spun in circles in mid-air, dazzling him. He foamed at the mouth and felt that the world had been turned upside down. On the other hand, the other 6 people in the team escaped the calamity. They stood in place and watched Takuman being taught a lesson by the ghost sister. It wasn't that they didn't want to help, but after they helped, they realized that no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't interfere with the existence of ghosts. The exorcist touched his head and even lit a cigarette on the spot. It's okay, it's just a small scene. Baolu, we've made a killing this time. After all, you can revive if you die. Little 2, don't be afraid. If you can't take it anymore, just go offline. We'll add each other offline as friends when we have time. I guarantee that we'll record a screen and send it to you. Takuman, he rolled his eyes as he was hung up, fully expressing his current feelings. Today was Friday, and tomorrow was the weekend. The programmers finally had some time to rest, so how could they not play to their heart's content? Besides, Takuman was a real sociopath who was addicted to the internet. It wasn't easy for him to get an account in the closed beta, so there was no way he would go offline. Perhaps it was because this yin-yang master's appearance was indeed handsome, and he just happened to be Tsueiwa's good friend. Or perhaps it was because of their old friendship in the Ghost Parade Instance Dungeon, so Tsueiwa's attack was loud but light. After teaching Takuman a lesson, she gently put him down again. Of course, there was a price to pay. The price was that Takuman was finally forced to accept his first level of Shikigami. That's more like it. Humph, I'll spare your lives. After signing the contract, Tsueiwa's mood improved a lot. She waved her hand and let them go. She even pointed at the road to the dark castle from afar. Actually, it was fine even if she didn't point the way. Because everyone realized that the balloon that they just got from Joker was actually glowing in the dark, and the light it emitted was just enough to point the way forward. Young man, this is your fault. Why do you have such a mournful face? After leaving Tsueiwa's territory, the talkative exorcist once again began to chatter. Look at the black-clothed Azan. He's also a summoner, but he's already drooling. Unlike you, you don't even want a female fighter that's delivered to your doorstep. Black-shirt Azan, he felt his hands itching. Speaking of which, it was strange. There were 7 people in the team, but the exorcist was already familiar with everyone. He wasn't even afraid of Xianxia, who was the most difficult to communicate with. Especially Black-shirt Azan, who obviously didn't like to talk nonsense or find something to talk about. However, he felt a sense of familiarity with the exorcist. But then again, he was indeed quite envious of Takuman. The strength of the female ghost just now was unfathomable. This was something that several of the supernatural professions in the team could see. To be able to recruit such a powerful spirit-branded retainer so easily, he didn't know if the closed beta would delete his file or not. If he didn't delete his file, when the open beta came out, there would definitely be a spot for Tsuchimikado's name on the leaderboards. The group of people walked and stopped. Not long after, the exorcist was the one who spoke. F***CK. He screamed. Everyone immediately got into an attack position and chased away the unknown animals that flew out of the darkness. Similarly, the exorcist had lost his memory. If he hadn't lost his memory, he would have remembered how he got the holy water and the gun of exorcism in the S-rank exorcism instance dungeon. Now, the main culprit had come looking for him. This time, it was the unlucky fallen angel who came looking for him. Back in the instance dungeon, he was sent to hell by the exorcist's gun. Now, he was back to seek revenge. Coincidentally, on the following journey, the 7-man team saw many old friends. Among them were but not limited to the vampire prince, the high priest of ancient Israel, the reclusive Kage, the sea wizard who specialized in controlling the sea. What was even stranger was that these old NPCs seemed to know them. Could this be a mystery game? After bidding farewell to Kage, the dark wizard frowned deeply. This night of the game could be said to be exciting. The 7 of them fought monsters along the way. Every few waves of monsters, they would encounter a boss. There was no level up prompt, and the monster didn't drop any treasure chest. I'm not sure, but the graphics and modeling of this game can be said to be superb. Maybe it's because it's in the closed beta, so the storyline isn't released so soon? Poseidon waved his hand, and a small water ball immediately gathered in his palm. Maybe it's just to let players experience the graphics and controls of the game. Take a look. Indeed. Even if there was no storyline in the closed beta at night, and they could only aimlessly fight monsters and find their way in the Black Forest, it was worth it for all the players who participated in the Infinite Looping Adventure closed beta. Not to mention other things, this extremely smooth combat style was enough to make people yearn for it. In the real world, their bodies weren't so light and agile. But in the game, whether it was night vision or muscle strength, they were all greatly improved. Everyone who jumped on the spot could easily surpass the world high jump champions on Earth. At the head of the game, Xianxia, who was holding a military knife, chopped off the branches of the tree demon in front of him. A hazy and unknown layer of bloody light appeared on the tip of the knife. After absorbing the sap of the tree demon, its attack power increased by a level. He lowered his eyes and looked at the military knife. The handle buzzed slightly in the vampire's hand, as if it had finally reunited with its master after a long time. The moment he pulled out the knife, Xianxia knew its name. Caligula. We're almost there. He put away the knife with a backhand, grabbed a branch, and jumped up, looking into the distance through the layers of leaves. In the distance, behind a small gap in the moonlight, the tip of the black castle towered majestically. He did not know if it was an illusion, but as they advanced into the Black Forest, the deeper they went, the darker the color of the castle seemed to fade. Instead, it blended with the moonlight behind them, forming a body of and ZWNJ. Soon, everyone realized that it wasn't an illusion. The 7 of them were the first team to reach the castle. Compared to the team behind them, they didn't suffer any injuries. Because they had the healer, Messiah, sitting on their backs, their health bars were full. When they completely walked out of the Black Forest, everyone realized that the castle, which looked a little bloody and dark, had become completely pure white. The tip of the castle was painted a bright blue. There were also clusters of balloons floating around. In the center of the balloons, there were colorful lights swaying in the air, spreading out a warm light. Aren't those Joker's balloons? Someone soon discovered this and, ZWNJ, point. Since the Joker's balloons had already reached the castle, it meant that he had already arrived at the banquet. Wait. When they stood in front of the castle, Takaman suddenly came back to his senses. What did they say this castle was? The Black King? It's the Black King's banquet? Messiah said uncertainly, I remember now. It's a wedding. The 7 of them stood in the same place, suddenly realizing something. So, we went through so much trouble to pass through the Black Forest. Who knows how many ghosts we met along the way, we were chased until we pissed our pants in terror. It took us a lot of effort to reach the other side. To attend this wedding? No, whose wedding is this? Is this the plot of this dungeon? Black question marks popped up over the heads of all the men. After a few minutes, the system finally came online again. Congratulations on reaching your destination, the White Castle where the Black King's banquet is held. The light wizards have been waiting for a long time. At the same time, a young man wearing a khaki trench coat appeared at the entrance of the castle. His hair color was a rare silver white, and his pupils were also faintly light. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that this was an albino patient at a glance. But compared to that, what was more amazing was his appearance. It was a beauty that transcended gender. It was hard to describe, but it was definitely unforgettable. Welcome to the banquet. Sweeping his gaze across the familiar faces, the magician's usually indifferent eyes couldn't help but have a hint of a smile. But soon, the smile disappeared. This was because Tsuchimikado scratched his head and muttered something to himself. After that, he went up to the handsome NPC and asked him what he knew. Excuse me, is there going to be a wedding in the castle? Zhongjiao? Wedding, what wedding, why didn't he know? Question, how do you feel when you wake up and find out that you've been married? Zhongjiao, thanks for the invitation. I'm still dumbfounded. After the dumbfounded state, my fists have hardened. Takaman was completely unaware of the situation in front of him, and even came forward to ask about the wedding. That was to be expected. According to the player's thinking, they must be here to attend the wedding after going through so many obstacles to reach the castle. Although they had never seriously played a holographic game before, they had read a lot of online gaming novels. There were so many holographic game-themed novels in Zhongdian Literature City and Lujiang Literature City, and they all had one thing in common: the NPCs were highly intelligent. Especially the light wizard NPC in front of them. He was so good-looking that he was obviously an important NPC. What if there was a special hidden reward for raising his favorability? What if, on the other hand, another exorcist, Master Duanshui, realized that something was amiss? He chimed in, "Before we passed through the Black Forest, we saw a clown and a rabbit. They said that they were here to attend a wedding." Zhongjiao narrowed his eyes, and a few guesses flashed through his mind. Just as he was about to speak, he heard loud music coming from the forest not far away. "Oh. My dear little white bird, after the circus's grand performance last time, we have reunited once again." Mad Hatter held a golden trumpet in his hand and walked while blowing. When he saw Zhongjiao in front of the castle, he jumped up from the ground and said, "I'm glad to see that you're fine, but I received an unexpected invitation. So I hurried over from the tea party. Look, I brought some friends." Following closely behind Mad Hatter was the Cheshire Cat, who was rolling in the air, the cute Mr. White Rabbit, and even a Knight of Hearts with a trident in his hand. What a pity. Ever since our partner Alice left, it's not easy to gather so many people. It's a good opportunity to introduce everyone to the cute Joker. Yes, only Mad Hatter would find the Joker cute. With the Mad Hatter leading this group of people to the castle, the empty space in front of the castle was almost completely filled. "Everyone, come in first. We'll talk about it later." After being interrupted, Zhongjiao did not have the desire to explain. Instead, he pointed his finger behind him. In the next second, the heavy castle door behind him was slowly pushed open, revealing a magnificent hall inside. As expected, it was completely different. When Zhongjiao left, the castle was still the Devil's Room in the trainee dormitory. Oh, no, it should be said that it was the shared room of the Devil and the Zhongjiao. Ever since the day he made the wish, the main system had borrowed the wish power after making the wish to ascend to the higher dimension and fulfilled his wish. Since it had ascended to the higher dimension, the infinite loop had become an ownerless object. Thus, the main system passed the authority of the infinite loop rule to the demons according to the previous transaction. Since the authority was in the devil's hands and magician was willing to stay with him, the devil took the opportunity to shut down the infinite loop that automatically pulled innocent people into the horror dungeon. This ending was exactly what Guguzi wanted. After all, in the future, demons only needed magicians to play with them. One person was enough, there was no need for more people to disturb them. In a sense, Zhongjiao had become the devil's chain. They were willing to be bound because of love. After shutting down a portion of the infinite loop's authority, the trainee dormitory also ceased to exist when the main system ascended to the higher dimension. Thus, the devil directly used the authority to open up a new space and copied their original room. Over. This was all thanks to the database left behind by the main system. It had to be said that although the devil had tricked the main system badly, the main system, the higher dimension AI, still did not care about the past. It could not wait for the devil and magician to accompany each other in the infinite loop for eternity, in case they were bored and suddenly wanted to ascend to the higher dimension to play with it. Main system, I don't want to deal with this kind of lunatic again in my life. Bye-bye. The flow of time in the infinite loop was different from the real world because it was in the world gap and was built on the timeline. After the survivors and trainees left the infinite loop, they returned to the real world. If they did not lose their memories, they would realize that only a few seconds had passed in the real world since they left. However, there was no way to erase their memories because of the infinite loop's self-protection measures. As long as they left the infinite loop, their memories would be forcefully erased unless they did not leave for the rest of their lives. After the devil took control of the infinite loop, it could also open the instance dungeon's entrance anytime and anywhere, obtaining the same authority as the main system. After a while, Zhongjiao felt a little bored, so he disguised the infinite loop as a holographic game with the devil. Then, they changed the original death into an online game where players could revive and then release them into the real world. This was very pleasant, and it was double the pleasure. In the past, Xianxia and the devil were on opposing sides, so they could not cooperate and were destined to be enemies. However, now that the two of them were together, both of them liked to find excitement and fun, so they hit it off and became a delightful duo. Thinking about the future when holographic games took over the real world, Xianxia wanted to laugh. The first batch of beta testers for the Infinite Loop adventure was the list of trainees who passed the thriller competition. Soon, these old friends would come to find them. Perhaps the survivors who finally escaped the Infinite Loop would not have thought that they would be able to go home one day, ha 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 ha. Therefore, Xianxia was in a good mood for the past few days. He even personally designed the Black Forest level and released the survivors' old acquaintances, so that they could feel the long-awaited warmth. While they were feeling the warmth, Xianxia stood in front of the castle, laughing as he watched the livestream. Therefore, he did not notice that the black castle behind him had quietly turned white. The Joker's balloon was released into the air, and the moonlight covered the top of the balloon. However, when they arrived in front of the castle, they told Xianxia that there was going to be a wedding in the castle. Wedding? What wedding? Whose wedding? Xianxia was dumbfounded. When he turned around and saw the splendid hall, what else could he not understand? Xianxia, oh, the Joker is me. The hall had been decorated a long time ago. It was a replica of the original broadcast hall, and even the sculptures were replicas of the gods of Mount Olympus. The hall was surrounded by golden light, and there was a pure gold chandelier and tassels hanging from the ceiling. The air was filled with the scent of alcohol, and it was as beautiful as a still oil painting. Higher up, a man in a black suit stood where he was, holding a large bouquet of packaged roses. He stood there lazily, and there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. He looked from afar and accurately fell on Xianxia. So many people were reduced to the background, and there was only one person in the dark golden eyes. Then, Xianxia remembered everything. After the final battle, he put the ring on the demon. After that, the demon rarely wore gloves, and even if he did, he would wear the ring. Logically speaking, the flower ring made of dried flowers would wither, but the demon seemed to have used his authority to stop the time of the ring, and it would forever stop at the moment Xianxia gave it to him. But Xianxia did not have a ring on his hand, because he did not buy a pair of rings when he bought it. The black-haired demon played with his hand, and often hinted to Xianxia that something was missing. Now that he thought about it, the demon probably had this idea since then. Wedding. He even kept him in the dark. Heh. Good for nothing. What Xianxia did not notice was that behind him, the seven people's gazes suddenly became a little strange. Not only them, but all the trainees who successfully passed through the Black Forest and arrived at the castle had different expressions on their faces. Some were surprised, some were in disbelief, but in the end, they were all stunned. Indeed, once they left the Infinite Loop, their memories would be erased. But once they entered, their memories would be at the mercy of the current ruler. So just now, the demon had a wicked sense of humor and temporarily returned their memories, and at the same time, muted everyone. So, everyone's eyes were filled with horror as they exchanged glances. I remember now, damn. Damn, wedding, what's going on? Why are we back? Didn't we go out, huh? I don't know, when did the Infinite Loop become a holographic game? Let me out. Then, when the system notified them that, welcome to the wedding of the magician and the demon, everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief. If they had to describe this news, it would be like hearing that Mars had crashed into Earth, or hearing that the neighbors next door were laughing so loudly that aliens could not bear the disturbance and flew to Earth to kidnap them. What? The magician was getting married? With whom? The demon? That lord? Huh? They knew each other? They were not related at all, but they were getting married. Everyone was a little dazed, as if they were in a dream. Everyone's impression of them was still the demon's special attention to the magician, the rose given by the casino, and the clear distinction between the two sides in the final game. In the end, not long after we left Infinite Loop, the two of them got together without a word? Huh? Tsuchimikado quickly took out a writing board from his backpack and wrote, "Magician, if you are forced to blink, blink on it." But none of the people involved paid attention to this. Because the wedding was done first and reported later, and it was a surprise created by the demon. Now, it seemed that there was a surprise, but no one knew if there was a happy one. Everything depended on the magician's decision, right? Xianxia walked up slowly, staring at the big bouquet of roses in the demon's hand with a faint smile. Since it's a wedding, there should be a bride, right? His insinuation was obvious. In the crazy circus instance, Xianxia had been seen by the demon in female clothes. Since it was a wedding this time, it would not be too much for the demon to dress up as a woman, right? Darling, of course. The demon smiled ambiguously, lowering his head and whispering into the magician's ear, "At night, I can wear anything you want. Of course, it would be best if I don't wear anything." Because some people were too flirtatious, the topic of cross-dressing had to come to an end. But wedding. Xianxia stood in place, mulling over the word. It was hard to describe his feelings. If he had to say, it was a little unexpected. They both knew that a wedding was too ceremonial, too superficial. Whether it was the devil or the magician, they did not need such a ceremony to maintain their relationship. Although the devil often said sweet words of love, he was not someone who cared about formalities. As for Xianxia, it was harder for him to say a word of love. Compared to that, he was more willing to put it into action. For example, sending everyone away and leaving himself behind. That was the magician's attitude. But occasionally there were some formalities that Xianxia did not dislike. Therefore, although he had a faint smile on his face, the magician still walked to the highest point and took the bouquet of roses from the devil's hand. The petals were still stained with crystal dew, reflecting bright colors. Each flower was similar to the roses that the devil had given him. It was obvious that they had been carefully selected. At the critical juncture of their interaction, the trainees in the hall finally realized the current situation. Even Su, who had just walked into the castle, dropped the book of the black hen in his hand, looking terrified. The magician took the initiative? What? So it was not the master's wishful thinking. Among the trainees, the 7th grade S were the most shocked. Even though Messiah and the other puppets who had been manipulated back then were mentally prepared, they were still shocked when they saw this scene. These two archenemies who had nothing to do with each other actually got together? Or a two-way arrow, wait, so they were pulled in just to attend the wedding of the devil and the magician. Snatch the bamboo shoots, everyone's eyes that were filled with fear turned into dead fish eyes. It was a pity that they were muted. Xianxia had his back to the people behind him, so he could not see the scene. The devil did not need anyone to say anything. However, the onlookers probably didn't realize that this wasn't the most ridiculous thing they had ever experienced. Just as they were forced to open their mouths and accept the public display of affection, a faint voice suddenly came from the shadows. Play the music. The next second, Mad Hatter, who was holding a loudspeaker, began to play. Accompanied by the Cheshire Cat's clapping, Joker's forceful drumming on the ground with the tip of his shoe, and Mr. Rabbit and a few other unknown ghosts singing a chorus, the scene went out of control. A little further away, rose petals began to flutter in the air. They fluttered down and covered the ground in a thick layer. It was supposed to be a warm and harmonious wedding march, but it was played with the meaning of a black man carrying a coffin, which made people not know what expression to make. But this was not the most frightening part. The most frightening thing was the voice that said to play music. Therefore, in the next second, every survivor in the hall saw a black-cloaked man in a Taoist robe standing on the steps at the bottom of the broadcast hall. He held a wordless book in his hand and had a cold expression on his face. However, he looked calm and composed. Everyone? Isn't this the F** King Zhuge-en, we haven't seen each other for a few days, and you're already shit like this? For a moment, everyone didn't know whether to celebrate Zhuge-en's return from the dead, ask why he agreed to take on the job of the wedding MC, or complain about his expression, tone, and outfit that didn't match that of the wedding witness. All of this fell into the eyes of the S-Class, which made it even more magical. This was because the S-Class knew that Zhuge-en's real identity was actually Guguzi. The wedding of these two was being witnessed by Guguzi. In a sense, it wasn't very harmful, but it was extremely insulting. On the other hand, Zhuge-en, whether it was standing posture or other things, was quite calm. It didn't feel like he was reuniting with an old friend at all. On the other hand, Su, who was reunited with Su Sen, was so excited that she couldn't speak. After Su calmed down a little, Su Sen spoke. we've already been bound to the infinite loop. We need to work in it for a while before we can redeem the right to return to the real world. The resurrected dead weren't like other people. In the end, the main system only left the energy for one wish, so there was very little energy left for resurrection. Therefore, people like Zhuge and Su Sen, even if they came back from the dead, would still be unable to leave the infinite loop for a period of time in the future. It just so happened that the holographic game had just started, so there were many places that needed manpower. They couldn't drag the ghosts from other dungeons to be NPCs. As a result, these people who came back from the dead began their future career as social animals under the joint persecution of the heartless pleasure criminals. As long as they accumulated a certain amount of working hours through their work, they could redeem the right to return to the real world. They earned the energy they went out for themselves, it was very fair. However, there were conditions to working for the infinite loop. For example, the survivors would be forced to forget their memories of this place after leaving the infinite loop, and as NPCs, they couldn't easily reveal their past. Regarding this matter, Susan was optimistic. Memories in the infinite loop weren't necessarily good memories. It could be accompanied by difficulty falling asleep, light sleep, constant vigilance, or even inexplicable fear. Forgetting one's memories was actually a self-protection mechanism for humans. Some things were better forgotten than remembered, especially after returning to the peaceful real world. It would be very difficult for them to return to their original pace of life as an ordinary person. Therefore, Susu forgetting wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Moreover, if Susan left, his memories would also be blurred, so there was nothing wrong with starting everything over again. The two grooms, please exchange rings. Zhuge An's voice didn't fluctuate at all under the gloomy music that filled the hall. It was as if he didn't react to the trainees' eyeballs that were about to fall out of their sockets. Who was he? He was Giguzi, an old fox who had been in the infinite loop for more than 10 years. What kind of situation had he not seen before? Why would he be afraid of this? As long as Zhuge An wasn't embarrassed, then it would be others who would be embarrassed. Of course, the devil and magician were obviously not ruthless people who would be embarrassed by this. Therefore, after Zhuge An's announcement, the devil happily put the ring on magician's finger, as if he was putting his own mark. This ring was also a flower ring, exactly the same as the one on the black-haired devil's finger. He had always been very territorial, just like his crazy possessiveness. Every time Xianxia woke up from his bed, his body would be densely covered with marks left by the devil, from his brow bone to the side of his legs. It was like the snow roses that they planted outside the French windows after they got together, swaying and blooming in the white snow. It was a breathtaking sight. Only Xianxia suddenly received a notification the moment the ring was put on his ring finger. You have shared control of the infinite loop, the ring is bound to you. It will not fall off as long as your soul is not destroyed. The devil transferred half of the power in the infinite loop to him. Along with his throne, power, glory, everything was given to him. The time limit was forever. Looking at the flower ring that bloomed freely on his finger, Xianxia remembered something else. After they got together, there weren't many secrets between them. Therefore, one night, Xianxia accidentally talked about his biggest secret. Didn't you always guess which world I came from? As expected, this topic piqued the devil's interest. The man changed his lazy appearance and quickly came over. He stroked Magician's back with one hand, intimately covering Magician in his shadow. Regarding this question, the main system had already revealed it. It knew that Xianxia came from the higher dimensional world. This higher dimensional world was different from the higher dimensional world that the main system wanted to go to, but they both belonged to the higher dimensional world. This was because certain rules of the infinite loop didn't work on Xianxia, including the devil's puppet line and why only Xianxia could find his weakness. However, the main system's guesses were always limited. Nothing could compare to Xianxia's personal narration. The devil had an extraordinary interest in everything about Magician. Although he had already experienced Magician's past in the Faust Instance dungeon, he still wanted to know more, everything. I did come from the higher dimensional world, but my original world isn't much different from the real world. You know this too. Xianxia briefly explained the situation in his world and then changed the topic. In my world, the infinite loop is a book. A book? The devil raised an eyebrow. It's an ordinary web novel called Thriller Trainee. You can think of it as the way this world is presented in the higher dimensional world in the form of a book. Xianxia started to recall the contents of the book. Fortunately, he had a good memory. After such a long time, he could still remember most of it. I remember that Zhuge-en, Messiah, and Xingyu appeared. Anyway, you didn't appear. Wait, no, you appeared. At that time, you already controlled Messiah, right? The white-haired youth furrowed his brows in deep thought. There was a side character with the same name as me. He died tragically as cannon fodder in the mental hospital instance dungeon. He didn't even make it through the first night. The cold arm around his waist tightened subtly. Xianxia was engrossed in his narration and didn't notice this. I didn't watch after I saw the cannon fodder die, so I didn't know that Messiah was already controlled by you. Who would have thought that after sleeping for a while, I transmigrated into the book and replaced the cannon fodder character? After chatting for a while, Magician ended the topic. You didn't expect it, right? You guessed for so long, but you definitely didn't expect that I came from such a higher dimensional world. The devil chuckled. Indeed, I didn't expect it. Xianxia didn't see it because his back was facing the devil. There wasn't a hint of a smile in the pair of dark golden eyes. Staring at the kiss mark on Magician's shoulder blade, the man's expression was gloomy. He didn't know why Magician transmigrated into a book. Obviously, Xianxia didn't know either. Devils hated variables. They also hated not being able to control them. So, it wasn't just the ring. Although the devil didn't say anything, Xianxia understood what he meant. As long as you wear it, no matter where you are, even if you transmigrate back, I'll find you. Xianxia didn't say anything. In his magic world, card masters didn't wear rings unless they were magicians who played with coins. It was like rolling up one's sleeves and showing it to the audience. They didn't use any magnetic devices and relied purely on hand speed. But now, he had a ring forever. Ever since the Infinite Loop Adventures closed beta test, the holographic game took over the world at an astonishing speed. It became the hottest topic of the day and harvested a large number of players. Under the impact of holographic games, traditional games became less attractive. What's more, this holographic game had a rich variety of gameplay and the game's graphics were almost the same as reality. Not to mention, the Infinite Loop Adventure was actually connected to everyone's brain waves. It was easy to control. Therefore, the major game companies in the world were facing a big crisis. It was said that they were already working overtime to develop a similar holographic game. The crowd that was pulled in to watch the wedding by the two happy husbands also left with a mouthful of dog food. At the same time, the resurrected NPCs began their working lives in the infinite loop to accumulate enough work hours for themselves to return to reality. Fortunately, Xianxia was not that harsh after becoming a capitalist. Therefore, about half a year after the Infinite Loop Adventure was put into operation, Susan successfully accumulated enough energy to exchange for permission to leave the Infinite Loop. Because Susan's performance was good, he was allowed to apply for an NPC residency permit. Not only did he not have to erase his memory, but he also did not have to return to the real world to be a social worker. He could use the holographic helmet to work in the Infinite Loop. On the other hand, the Infinite Loop would also use the operating expenses of the holographic game to pay him a salary. This was indeed a way out. For this reason, Xianxia adopted the suggestions of the survivors and set up a point system in the game. As long as they completed enough levels, they could use the points to exchange for their memories in the Infinite Loop. Of course, the price was that they would become exclusive workers in the Infinite Loop. With so much cheap labor, it was wonderful to make use of it. After a while, the resurrected NPCs in the Infinite Loop had exchanged for the permission to return to the real world. Even the slowest one planned to leave today. Yes, it was Zhuge-en. However, Zhuge-en did not plan to apply for an NPC residency permit like Su Senator. It seemed like he wanted to return to the real world with peace of mind. For this reason, Xianxia specifically talked to him. Xianxia was a little surprised by his decision. You don't want to keep your memories in the Infinite Loop? Zhuge-en shook his head. My mission has been completed. What did he have to continue? What kept him alive was nothing more than the last wishes of the deceased. Those promises made when he was young and frivolous, and in the end, he would use the rest of his life to repay them under the foundation of the bones. But at the end of the day, as a person, he no longer had any reason to live. And now, since the wish and goal that he had persisted for so many years had been achieved, there was no more reason for him to continue living. Actually, dying in the final battle was enough. That was good enough. It was in line with Zhuge An's plan for himself. Such a death would not only restrict magicians' footsteps, it would also be a grand finale. Therefore, Zhuge An's first reaction after waking up from the eternal silence of death was shock. He was surprised that magician had chosen such a path. This path was better than he had expected. It was even better than what he had expected. There was no better ending than this. After all, Zhuge An had never considered the possibility of him coming back to life. Hence, he was at a loss. But now that he was resurrected, he had to find something to do. Before entering the infinite loop, Zhuge An was a national secret research genius. He was high-spirited and talented. But not long after a few important experimental projects fell into his hands, he was pulled into the infinite loop. Now that the dust had settled, it was time for him to go back and continue his research. The infinite loop doesn't need me anymore. This place belongs to you, Zhuge An said. The robe on his body made him look even more slender. There was no expression on his face. It was impossible to tell if he was happy or angry. But that's just Guguzi's mission, not Zhuge An's. Zhongjiao said, I respect your decision. But if you feel tired from your research, it's not a bad idea to play games occasionally to relax. What do you think? The black-haired man revealed a faint smile. Strangely, it wasn't Zhuge An's usual cold smile. It wasn't sarcastic either. It was gratifying, but it made one's scalp tighten. He looked deeply at the white-haired magician. His finger suddenly moved away from the game button. You're right. Zhuge An narrowed his eyes. What does Guguzi have to do with me, Zhuge An? Zhongjiao, that's right, but why did you accept my advice so quickly? If that's the case, then I'll reluctantly stay. Since the infinite loop doesn't have a main system, with your #1 skill level, you might be able to completely destroy the infinite loop. Zhongjiao? Forget it. Although his words weren't very nice, at least he managed to convince this cheap labor to stay. Since he was willing to stay, Zhongjiao waved his hand and gave Zhuge An the authority to manage the NPC. He also expressed his eagerness like a leader meeting his subordinate. He said a lot of things that he hoped the other party would actively build the infinite loop and build a beautiful home. But for some reason, when Zhongjiao returned to his room, he thought about it carefully and felt that he was the one who was fooled. Zhuge An had changed his body. His appearance was completely different from Guguzi. Even if he returned to the real world, he wouldn't be able to take over his original identity as Guguzi. Therefore, even though Zhuge An had forced him for a long time, he had no intention of going back. Damn it, this treacherous guy. No wonder all the S-class were so secretive about him. When the crowd found out that he was a good person, they were so shocked that they were speechless. He was a three-faced spy in the cursed mask dungeon. Good lord, his nature hasn't changed. In fact, Zhuge An didn't plan to go back. He was a researcher in the real world who had signed a confidentiality agreement. His interpersonal relationships were so simple that it was pitiful. Plus, he had spent so many years in the infinite loop and even experienced death once. So he was different from others. He only had that desire to go back to the real world. Compared to going back, he was more interested in the higher dimension where the main system went. He wanted to do something. But Zhuge An's business ability was too strong. He alone held up half the sky. So Zhongjiao simply clapped his hands and threw the matter aside. He pulled the devil and ran to the real world to play. When the two of them weren't mortal enemies, it was a disaster when they got together. When one started a fire, the other would add more firewood, afraid that the fire wouldn't be strong enough. Zhuge An wasn't wrong. Zhongjiao and the devil were both pure hedonists. Under their joint disaster, the future of the infinite loop was uncertain. But this time, it was a little awkward. Because it was his first time controlling, Zhongjiao got the coordinates of the real world's landing point wrong. According to his original plan, Zhongjiao wanted to go and see Susu. After Susu, Graduated, she worked in the infinite loop with Sioux Senator. Perhaps many survivors and trainees didn't expect that they would be forced to carry a small backpack back here after working so hard to escape from the infinite loop. So when he teleported, he and the devil landed at different coordinates in the real world. After realizing that he had teleported wrongly, Xianxia didn't react immediately. Since he was still wearing the ring, he just needed to let the devil find him. But it had to be said that the situation in front of him was beyond his expectations. He landed in a ball full of toasts. Around him were guests wearing evening gowns and holding champagne glasses. Originally, Xianxia wanted to leave quickly after walking out of the shadows, but he didn't expect people around him to notice him. He looks familiar. Wait a minute. Isn't that the missing young master of the Z family? After the first person exclaimed, the rest of the people took it for granted. This unforgettable appearance, hair color, and eye color. Yes, it's definitely the young master. Speaking of which, this is strange. I heard that he was the most favored young master, but why didn't the Z family care about him after he went missing? Instead, they favored their young master. Strange. Who knows the secrets of these clans? What if there's some kind of grudge between them? But let's make a call first. Even though we haven't found much, if we can provide clues about the young master, we'll be able to save face in front of the family. Xianxia, he didn't expect this situation. It was obvious that this was a mess left behind by the original owner before he transmigrated. Thinking back to the description of the original Xianxia in Thriller Trainee and the character of the original Xianxia, Xianxia felt like he should not stay at this place any longer, or else who knew what would happen next. Sorry, you've got the wrong person. Please move. He nodded politely, but it didn't have much effect. Just as he was about to force his way through, he saw all the whispers around him suddenly quiet down. Xianxia turned around and saw Xianxia in a formal suit parting the crowd and walking toward him. Xianxia lived up to his title of number 2. He became the first player to use his points to redeem his memory. It was obvious that Xianxia was a well-deserved big shot at this ball. At least once he showed his stance, some people immediately remembered his relationship with the young master and stopped talking. Are you planning to come back? He escorted Xianxia out of the ball hall. No one stopped them along the way. No, I'm just out for a walk. Xianxia paused. Actually, I'm not. Back then, he needed to cooperate, so he didn't explain himself. But now that everything was over, he had to clarify some things. For example, he wasn't the original Xianxia. However, Xianxia waved his hand and stopped him from saying anything else. I didn't choose to support you back then because of this relationship. The man's voice was cold, but there was a hint of insight. Even if you weren't, my choice wouldn't have changed. That's right. Even if he was a childhood friend, he still had an impression of him and wouldn't be completely unable to recognize him. Moreover, with Xianxia's character, he wouldn't place the future of his organization on someone who was only related to nepotism. After understanding this, Xianxia chuckled. I was wrong. At that moment, he saw the black-haired devil across the road, narrowing his eyes as he stared at him and Xianxia. This time, it was Magician who couldn't help but laugh. He didn't know why. Even though they weren't related, this situation felt like they were caught red-handed. Xianxia cursed in his heart. He waved at Xianxia, thanked him, and strode across the zebra crossing towards the unfriendly devil. Magician, who rarely took the initiative to hold on to the devil's hand. He didn't avoid the curious gazes at the entrance of the ball. The 2 floral rings on his ring fingers shone brightly. Let's go home. Home. This word made the devil feel an indescribable emotion. After meeting Magician, he experienced many emotions that he had never felt before. Everything, but he didn't hate it. The devil didn't spare a glance at the other ants. He was in a good mood as he held on to Magician's hand. Let's go home. Their home was an endless cycle. Present, future, and always. Susu had recently been addicted to the global hit holographic game and could not extricate himself. This infinite looping adventure had recently become the focus of the world's attention. It was because the developer behind it was too mysterious, causing this game to appear out of nowhere. There was not much warning at all, but its quality passed the mark and blew up the world. It was said that many countries had sniffed out the future direction of the world from this holographic game and formed many research teams to collectively enter the game to seize the opportunity. However, these were not that important to ordinary people. For a loyal fan of online games like Susu, he just wanted to have fun. What's more, he was really lucky to be one of the 100 lucky people selected out of billions of people. It was simply enviable. For this reason, Susu had some ideas. He felt that this game was quite fun, and it was so popular recently. He might be able to find a way out in the game in the future. As the first holographic game, Infinite Looping Adventure could be said to be a pioneer. The game helmet of the closed beta did not limit the game time, and ordinary game helmets could only be online for 5 hours a day. Therefore, there was a closed beta helmet on the market that had a price but no supply. It could be said that Susu would not have to worry about food and drink for the rest of his life just by holding this helmet. It just so happened that he had graduated. Otherwise, it would be troublesome to find a job. It was also thanks to this helmet that Susu's family also supported his decision to let him develop his new plan in the holographic game. Susu was overjoyed to be able to solve his work. Now, he did not stay up late or sleep in. Every day after waking up, after washing up and eating breakfast, he put on the helmet and logged into the game. This was because he had a secret. In Infinite Looping Adventure, he had a guide that no one else had. No one else had it except for Susu. Morning. Susu, who had just logged into the game, immediately showed a big smile. Morning. The guide's voice was very gentle, easily reminiscent of a comfortable sofa or the afternoon sun. It was strange. Susu felt like he had known this person for a long time, but he did not have any impression of it. However, when he heard the guide's voice, he felt his heart beat faster for some reason. He hadn't even seen the other party's face before. He had only heard the other party's voice. How could it be so ridiculous? All of a sudden, Susu felt a little regretful. Hence, he lowered his head and sent a text message to Xianxia and Takaman. Xianxia was a top-level Yin-Yang Eyes user, while Takaman was a top-level Yin-Yang master. Both of them were ranked in the top 100 players in the world. Of course, Susu was also at the bottom of this list. Although he felt that he was a noob, in the eyes of others, he was indeed a true god. He was the kind of big shot that people would surround him and beg to hug his thigh when he appeared in a public setting. Soon, his two friends replied to his message. Xianxia, still in the dungeon. Wait. Takaman, coming. Takaman, by the way, there's an S-level dungeon today. I pulled a few of the top 10 players with me. Let's meet at the usual place in 2 hours. What? A big shot in the top 10 of the rankings. And it's an S-level dungeon. Susu couldn't help but feel a little flustered when he saw this message. He was still a bottom feeder in the top 100. Takaman, on the other hand, was a true top godly player who occupied the 10th place. He usually played with people from both sides. Susu rarely entered this kind of group dungeon. Usually, he would at most bring his friends to an A-level dungeon to test the waters. Moreover, they were going to enter an S-level dungeon. In the current team combination ranking, only the duo of number 1 and number 9 had been steadily in the first place. They had cleared countless S-level dungeons and had become an existence that everyone looked up to. Except for this pair of fixed duo, who was so mysterious that no one had ever seen their true faces, the other teams were terrible. The second-ranked team was still Xianxia, who led the elite team of the Night People Guild under his name to break the A-level dungeon record. It could be said that entering an S-level dungeon was no less than exploring a new land. They didn't even need to ask for a pass evaluation. As long as they could pass, they could definitely run to second place on the rankings. Just as Susu was feeling nervous, the guide spoke again. Are you nervous? The heat that had just subsided with great difficulty rose once again. Susu scratched his head, as if he wanted to use this action to eliminate his unnaturalness. It's okay. The guide comforted him. Don't be afraid, I'll watch over you. Susu, F***ck. This is too much of a foul. In fact, he himself didn't know why he had a guide. Clearly, other players didn't have one. Moreover, his guide's authority was very high. Sometimes, he would even tell Susu where some special items were hidden in the dungeon. There was even one time when Susu was about to be dragged away by ghosts, the guide helped him avoid detection. At that time, he was hiding in the closet, and his ears were full of the guide's voice. "Shoo, don't make a sound. I can only temporarily block the other party's perception. Don't tell anyone. If the higher-ups find out, I'll be punished." As everyone knew, the NPCs in the Infinite Loop adventure were very intelligent. They were even comparable to humans. For example, there was a high-level NPC in the main city that was widely known by the players. Usually, he had black hair and black eyes, wore an elegant Taoist robe, and did not smile. Even if he rarely said a few words, his poisonous tongue was unbearable. However, he was also very smart. There were several times when players formed a team to ask for external help to fool him, but in the end, they were fooled until they lost their pants. However, the mission rewards given by this NPC were really generous. It was so generous that many players on the forum were willing to be masochists and receive venom and sarcasm. They also cycled through the main city every day to meet this NPC. Susu really wanted to ask the guide who he was. Was he a high-level NPC in this game? Or was he an ordinary person hired by the Infinite Loop adventure? However, for some reason, Susu couldn't say the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Perhaps he realized that he had touched something that he shouldn't have. If he knew that the other party was just an intelligent NPC in the Infinite Loop adventure, how sad would it be? Therefore, he remained silent today. He only smiled and said in a low voice, "Of course I believe you." As long as the guide was still around, Susu had never really been in danger. As expected, it was the same for this S-rank dungeon. Before entering, everyone got to know each other. Looking at these big shots with the IDs of the Dark Wizard, Messiah, and Poseidon, Susu also trembled and reported his ID. The Dark Wizard looked at him and said, "I know you. You have the Book of the Black Hen." This book was also one of the famous special items in the black magic world. In the end, they could be considered to be of the same origin. In particular, the Dark Wizard, as the leader of the Witchcraft Association, had offered Susu an olive branch several times. However, Susu did not want to join any organization. This was because subconsciously, he always felt that he seemed to be in an organization. It couldn't be said that he was in an organization. It was more accurate to say that he had recognized a boss. Although Susu could not remember which boss he had recognized, this did not prevent him from being a free person. What if one day his boss summoned him? Alright. Let's stop chatting. The dungeon is about to start. The exorcist turned around and looked at them who were chatting happily. He gestured to Xianxia to get ready. Other than Xianxia, only the exorcist, who was ranked number 4 among the S-rank present, had his memories of the Infinite Loop adventure. Therefore, looking at the familiar faces in front of him, he had already made arrangements for everyone's abilities. As for the other S-rank, because they were in the same team during the internal testing, even if they did not have the Infinite Loop adventure, everyone was considered to be familiar with each other and would not treat each other as outsiders. Xianxia simply explained a few things to take note of. This time, our goal is to clear the dungeon. Our first priority is to ensure Messiah's safety. At this time, Messiah had already developed the ultimate healing skill, Uriel's Embrace. As long as there was enough channeling time, her HP bar could be instantly restored. With such a precious healing skill, of course, their first priority was to ensure her safety. Everyone stopped smiling and nodded solemnly, indicating that they understood. Alright, then let's go. Congratulations to the team led by player Xianxia. Members, the Exorcist, Messiah, Black Azan, Poseidon, the Dark Wizard, Takaman, Susu. They have cleared the S-rank dungeon Atlantis and become the record holder of this S-rank dungeon. The world broadcast sounded throughout the game. It was broadcasted 3 times in a row, giving them enough face. However, after being teleported out, Susu was still in a state of shock. He sat on the spot. After a long while, he spent 500 points to let the system restore his HP bar to full. Then, he chose to leave the dungeon without stopping. There were all kinds of dangers in this dungeon. But what made Susu fall into a trance was something else. At the moment of life and death, he could have revived, but for some reason, Susu forgot that this was a holographic game. He really felt that death was coming. So at the last second, he finally mustered up the courage to ask the guide. The guide was silent for a moment. His voice was obviously apologetic. "Sorry, I can't see you now. I can't tell you this because it's against the rules." At that moment, Susu felt his heart drop to the bottom. If it wasn't an NPC, he could at least meet it in real life, right? This answer could only mean that his guide was just an AI NPC. Susu felt that this was ridiculous. He actually fell in love with an NPC in the game that he had never even seen before. He even wanted to develop a relationship with her. He must have lost his mind. "Sue, why haven't you played the game for 2 days?" After locking himself in his room for a few days, even his family noticed his abnormality. No, I just feel like I'm a little addicted. It's good to rest for a few days." Susu walked to the entrance. "Don't worry about me, Mom. I'm fine. Other than soy sauce, is there anything else you want to buy? If not, I'm going downstairs." He put on his shoes, jumped twice on the spot, picked up his wallet, and went downstairs. There was nothing that time couldn't cure. Maybe it would be better in a few days. Susu was choosing things from the shelves. When he was paying, he inadvertently saw a bottle of pineapple beer. He subconsciously reached out for it. He didn't like pineapple beer, and he never even drank. But today, he suddenly felt like drinking, so he took it. "Hello, that'll be $35. Just as Susu was about to pay, another hand brushed past him and handed a $100 bill to the salesperson. "Do you like pineapple beer too?" A familiar steady voice sounded behind him. This was a voice that Susu would never forget for the rest of his life. He turned around in shock and saw a young man waving at him with an identical bottle of pineapple beer in his hand. He didn't know why, but he had the urge to cry even though he had never seen it before. Even if it was so unfamiliar that he had forgotten his memory, that sense of familiarity was not fake. "I don't like pineapple beer, but the person I like can't drink alcohol. He gets drunk as soon as he drinks, so he can only drink this. So pineapple beer became the secret code that I promised him when we met in the next life." Susan smiled. "Now, as promised, I'm here to bring him home. The Thriller Trainee competition is starting tomorrow. Aren't you going to prepare?" In the S-class room without a trace of light, the main system's cold voice suddenly rang out. "Messiah has been manipulated. You didn't notice anything strange. The puppet line has been running. What do you need to prepare?" The man on the high-back chair sneered. The puppet line around his fingers flew into the air. Tomorrow was the day the Thriller Trainee competition began. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. At least for all the survivors who signed up for the Thriller Trainee competition, that was the case. This was the first large-scale competition held by the Infinite Loop. While they were tempted by the rewards, they were also worried and excited about what was to come. However, this kind of nervousness had no effect on the devil. In fact, it made him feel even more bored. This boredom came too quickly. It was so fast that his initial interest was gone. A month ago, when the main system came to him to cooperate, the devil thought it was a very good suggestion. It was rare for him to have some expectations. He was a little tired of the Infinite Loop's traditional model. It was always the same few people going back and forth. The S-class instance dungeons were related to the main system's energy and could not be casually opened. Who knew how many S-class instance dungeons had been destroyed by the devil? Some of the S-class instance dungeons were very resistant to his entry. At this time, the main system came to give him a pillow. How could the devil refuse? Wouldn't it be more interesting to wait until the people who survived turned around and realized that it was just a game of despair? With this kind of bad taste, the devil agreed to the main system's request for cooperation. But now, boring. Too boring. All the instance dungeons for the first one-man show had been sent to him. The devil could choose any instance dungeon to play as an NPC. Not to mention, now that he had the authority from the main system, he could change into different NPC appearances and continue his business of stirring up trouble and watching from behind the scenes. It was supposed to be such an interesting thing, but the devil had no interest in it now. He did not want to go to any of the instance dungeons. Even more annoying was that the main system's automatic weather system for the trainee dormitory was loaded for thunderstorms. Bright white lightning flashed across the night sky, illuminating the sea and the island. What followed was a heavy downpour. It was so heavy that it seemed to turn the whole world upside down. At this moment, the black-haired devil's mood plummeted to the bottom. He crooked his finger, and the floor-to-ceiling window that provided the only light source was also covered by thick curtains, not allowing any light to pass through. He didn't want to expose any of his weaknesses in front of the main system, so he simply laid down on the bed and pretended to be asleep. In the room that was completely shrouded in darkness, the man's dark golden pupils tirelessly flickered with a bored light. Although for a demon, things could only be categorized as interesting and boring, he could only categorize them into two categories. However, such a situation was still rare. It was as if something was missing. He was missing something that could keep him interested, passionate, and tireless. What is it? Was there really such a thing in this world? A careless sneer came from the darkness. Perhaps it was because the weather was too depressing, but the demon actually rested for a while. He rarely slept because he was not a human, so he did not need to sleep as a form of rest. But sometimes, if it was too boring, he would rather sleep than be awake. He didn't know how much time had passed, but before he even opened his eyes, he keenly sensed that something was wrong with his surroundings. It was too bright. This light should not be the usual darkness of his room. Even if he pulled open all the curtains and turned on the lights, there would not be such a glaring light. The man suddenly opened his eyes. What entered his eyes was a spacious room. The room's tone was gray, white, and blue. Outside the huge floor-to-ceiling window was an endless snowfield. At the moment, it was snowing heavily, and every snowflake was the size of a feather. The fireplace burned passionately not far away, and the wood crackled with soothing sounds. It was warm and genial. Main system, what's going on? The demon sat up from the bed, looking rather displeased. He had only slept for a while, and the main system had already given him such a fuss. Could it be that he had revealed a flaw somewhere, and the main system had discovered that he did not like thunderstorms, so it was hinting at him in a roundabout way? When would the system learn the hypocrisy of humans? But other than the main system, there was no one else who could silently change the surrounding environment in the trainees' dormitory. Unexpectedly, the main system that had always responded to him immediately was now incomparably silent. The demon called out to it a few times, but there was no sign of an answer. The man's eyebrows furrowed even more. He stared coldly at the fluffy carpet on the wooden floor, and stepped on it without hesitation, looking around the unfamiliar room. It was obvious that this was a room filled with the scent of life. Not only were there small objects placed around the room, but there was also a green bonsai at the corner of the table, a golden knife and fork on the dining table, and roses in full bloom in the snow. Everything indicated that there were signs of human habitation. All the household items were in a set. 2 cups, 2 dinner plates, and even the clothes in the wardrobe were divided into 2 colors, black and white. One of the wardrobes was his unchanging black suit, and the other wardrobe was mainly made up of windbreakers and khaki. An adult male who did not live alone. They should be a couple. What was ridiculous was that one of them had a body shape and habits that were very similar to his. After a simple round, the demon was able to determine the basic situation here. He stepped into the living room of this room and saw another black room that was connected to this one. This black room belonged to him. The demon walked into the area of his own room, and his heart was filled with suspicion. Before he fell asleep, many of the decorations in the room had obvious changes. For example, the khaki windbreaker hanging on the hanger, which was obviously not his style, the long silver-white hair left on the black bedsheet, and the ugly charred rabbit doll on the bed, which was obviously cherished by its owner. What the hell was the main system doing? The black-haired man rubbed his temples and activated his ability to control shadows. The shadows that covered the 2 rooms reported back all the information they saw, and his face darkened even more. Just as the demon was trying to contact the main system, the sound of a door opening suddenly came from the silent air. It was not from the black room on his side, but from the white room on the other side. The Xianxia was back. He was in a good mood today. He had just wandered around the main city and found an S-level dungeon that was fun to watch, so he decided to come back and drag the demon along. Ever since they had been together, the fun had been endless. In the past, the demon was the only one who stirred up trouble, but now there was another person who cooperated and fooled the players. However, the Xianxia did not like to stir up trouble, he only liked to watch the show, so the demon was usually the one who stirred up trouble. He only needed to play the role of the idle spy among the players, and cooperate with the big boss behind the scenes to watch the show. Just as he was about to return, the Zhuge suddenly looked at him with an enigmatic gaze. Unfortunately, you won't be able to join this dungeon, I'll save a spot for you next time. The Xianxia? The Zhuge words came out of nowhere, but as a black-hearted prophet, the Xianxia felt that as long as it came out of his mouth, every sentence and every word was worth pondering. But this time, he did not understand. He and the demon held the power of the infinite loop, and the demon was passionate about it, so how could the demon change his personality in the time it took him to come back? Not much had happened recently, but more and more survivors had accumulated enough points to exchange for their memories in the infinite loop. Regardless of whether this was a good thing or not, it was still a reunion of old friends. Compared to the other ignorant normal players, the survivors were in tears the moment they regained their memories. Just a few days ago, Xianxia led a group of B-level trainees from No. 1 middle school to form a new guild called Class 9. It was said that the founders were No. 99 and No. 15. In just a day of the guild's establishment, the other B-level trainees had all gathered together. A few days ago, Xianxia also went back to join in the fun and brought Class 9 to an A-level dungeon. Other than that, there was nothing else. Here, it was necessary to praise Zhuge's superb business skills, to the extent that one would wonder if he would overwork himself. With such a leisurely mood, Xianxia slowly teleported back to their dormitory. Just as he returned, he saw the black-haired man standing at the intersection of the two rooms, staring at him with an indecipherable expression. Xianxia raised a brow. At this time, the demon would usually be in the room taking a bath or tasting wine. If he was in a better mood, he might set up an easel and use the superb drawing skills he had redeemed from the main system to draw something indecent. If he was not in the room, then he must be on his way to find him. But now, Xianxia took a step forward and suddenly retracted his foot. His relaxed aura suddenly turned cold, and a thin poker card appeared at his fingertips. Magician pointed at the man's neck, his voice cold. "Who are you?" It was not because the man did not have the flower ring on his white gloves, but because of the tacit understanding and intuition he had developed over time. This was not a demon. Or rather, this was not the demon he knew from his memory. "I should be the one asking that question, you nameless ant." The man narrowed his eyes, and invisible puppet strings shot out from his hand, piercing through the cold air towards the white-haired youth. Therefore, what happened next was logical. They did not even exchange a few words before they started fighting on the spot. One manipulated shadows and puppet strings, while the other flashed his poker card, the golden crowbar flashing with a cold light. To be honest, after Xianxia came to power, he used the extra energy to strengthen almost all the parts of his body that could be strengthened. His overall quality was already at the peak of human beings, and there were even signs of him surpassing them. In addition, he had fought the demon too many times, and Xianxia could not be more familiar with his opponent's moves and tactics. On the other hand, the demon, who came from the parallel world and had not experienced the thrilling trainee competition, was completely unfamiliar with magicians' attack patterns, and was even conceited about his own abilities. Hence, after a few rounds, magician grabbed him by the collar, pressed his knee against his chest, and pinned him to the ground. It had to be said that this was probably the worst loss he had ever suffered since he was born out of malice. "What game are you playing today?" The black-haired demon was pinned to the ground, and magician looked down at him from above. "Tell me, did you lose your memory or did you regain your youth?" It was hard to describe the demon's feelings at that moment. He covered his eyes and suddenly laughed. In that instant, his cold blood began to boil, and he finally found what he was missing. Joy, excitement, the joy of meeting his match made him narrow his eyes. It was interesting. Xianxia was very familiar with the devil's expression. They had fought many times in the instance dungeon and fought outside the instance dungeon. They had fought tit for tat and were evenly matched. Every time Xianxia tricked the devil would have such a joyful expression, as though he was afraid that Xianxia couldn't tell that he was in a good mood. Strange, too strange. The person in front of him was indeed a devil, but he wasn't. Xianxia ignored his laughter and rudely pulled off the devil's right glove. As expected, there were no traces of the flower ring on the outside or inside the glove. It was strange enough that Xianxia didn't see the ring on his hand. One had to know that the devil couldn't wait to display the ring all the time. He was like a flamboyant peacock, announcing to everyone the intimate relationship between him and magician. Not to mention, the feeling this Mephisto in front of him gave him. Cold, sharp, fierce, crazy, and cruel. It wasn't like the devil's personality that was suppressed in the Judgment Day Instance dungeon. It was more like how Xianxia felt when he first met the devil. Of course, it didn't mean that the devil had changed. It was just that in front of Xianxia, these negative emotions were suppressed and hidden. It was much gentler. At least it wasn't as superficial as it was now. Others might be at a loss of what to do and wouldn't know what was going on. But for Xianxia, he was able to sort out some clues. Magician was deep in thought. He turned back and opened the Infinite Loop's current access system. After the main system had been upgraded to the higher dimension, Zhuge had created another access system, also known as the Fool system. This system didn't have any intelligence, so it could only give instructions and not answer questions. As expected, the other half of the access system was gray. As everyone knew, the Infinite Loop's access system was divided into two parts, shared by Xianxia and the devil. Since he was here, but the other half of the access system couldn't be used, the truth was obvious. Is it from a parallel world? After all, he had transmigrated from a book, so it was easy for him to accept this kind of phenomenon. It was just that Xianxia didn't expect this to happen to a demon. No matter how he thought about it, it was a little too inconceivable. If it was only a guess at first, the information revealed by the other party was enough to confirm the demon's suspicions. So it was a parallel world. The man stopped laughing. Where's the main system? There was no doubt that the surrounding environment was the trainee dormitory. However, what puzzled the demon the most was that the main system had not responded to him for a long time. Logically speaking, as long as the thriller trainee competition was still going on, it was impossible for the main system to be uncontactable, unless, Xianxia laughed. Didn't you make a deal with the main system? Can't you guess whether it has ascended to the higher dimensions or not? The demon narrowed his eyes and concealed the surprise in his heart. From this sentence, he had already obtained enough information. It wasn't that this parallel world didn't have a thriller trainee competition, but the competition had already ended? Even the main system had gone to the higher dimensions. This feeling was like he had been looking forward to a dessert after a meal for a long time, only to be told that the dessert had been eaten by rats before it was even placed on the table. It was quite unpleasant. However, this displeasure only lasted for a moment. After a moment, the black-haired demon put on his usual frivolous smile again. Although there was no dessert, he had unearthed a delicacy. Oh, being pressed to the ground by magician, he didn't resist. Instead, he dragged out the last word and said nonchalantly, "Then who are you?" Compared to the disdainful ant in the beginning, the demon's attitude now was pleasant. He had always had a good attitude towards things that could interest him, and he would relax his tolerance and bottom line when appropriate. The man's frivolous gaze swept over magician's beautiful face, from her light pink eyes to her high-nosed bridge and tightly pursed thin lips. Finally, it landed on her slender white neck and her collarbone that could be easily seen from his angle. At this moment, even the demon who was not interested in physical appearance had to admit that the young man in front of him had a face that was unforgettable. The demon picked up a strand of magician's silver white hair that had fallen down and said in an intimate tone, "My canary in the parallel world, or perhaps, my forbidden lover?" The demon felt that his guess made sense. Although he had never done such a thing before, his interest in the little beauty in front of him, whose appearance and personality were to his liking, had indeed ignited an interest that he had never had before. With this kind of interest, it was not impossible to imprison the other party and treat him as his own possession. On second thought, he felt that this was a good idea, the kind that could be put into action immediately. Hee. However, what greeted him was magician's cold laughter and a merciless punch. Right in the eye. Although to a non-human demon, this strength was not much different from scratching an itch, but there was no doubt that it infuriated him. In the next second, black shadows shot out from all corners of the room. The sinister tips glowed with a strange and ominous color as they surged towards the white-haired youth's back. Xianxia, who had already anticipated this move, continued to grab the devil's collar, and once again took advantage of the gap to give him an uppercut. Then, he rolled away on the spot without any desire to continue the fight, rolling into his white Mediterranean-style white room. There was a fireplace and a huge chandelier. The white light from the snowy plains reflected into the room, illuminating the entire room. Thus, in contrast, there were fewer shadows. Xianxia had the advantage of the environment and could avoid the demon's ability to manipulate shadows. There was nothing wrong with using his home ground advantage. Seeing his skillful movements, the black-haired demon's suspicions deepened. Just now, he had realized that his puppet strings were unable to control this person. That's right, when he was pressed to the ground, the demon had tried to implant puppet strings into him. But it was obvious that he had failed. He had achieved the first condition of physical contact, how could he have failed? His puppet strings came from the darkness and malice in the hearts of living creatures. The higher the intelligence of the animal, the more effective it was. It could be said that as long as it was a human, it would not be able to escape his puppet strings. The demon had never failed before. This was the first time. Now that he thought about it, the other party had given him quite a few surprises. The first time he was defeated, the first time he was embarrassed, the first time he failed, no matter if it was the first time they fought, or the subsequent developments, the other party clearly knew him very well and was able to handle him with ease. This was very unusual. If it was just a pet canary, then at least the canary wouldn't have such high combat ability to beat up its owner. Moreover, with his personality, it was impossible for him to tell another person everything about his abilities without reservation. Other than that, what caught the demon's attention was the items he found in the two rooms. Not only were the items in pairs, but there were also many traces that were worth investigating. There should have been a couple living here, and one of them was the white-haired beauty in front of him. Now, it seemed that one of them was very likely him in the parallel world. Not only the details in the room, but also the complete set of black suits in the wardrobe that were the same size as his habit. But how was this possible? If it wasn't Xianxia, if it wasn't Canary, then how could he live with another person? Just this answer made the demon feel that it was ridiculous and unbelievable. Coming from the parallel world, he didn't even think about the most ridiculous and impossible answer. Swoosh swoosh swoosh, the poker card pierced through the air and nailed itself deep into the wall. Waves of dust fell from the card, filling the air with dust. On the other side, the puppet strings that missed also cut the dark blue carpet into pieces and continued to grind it to shreds. Coincidentally, the shadow swam by and pushed the bohemian-style vase that the magician bought from the real world to the ground. With a crisp shattering sound, the vase shattered and scattered all over the floor. Xianxia turned his head and happened to see this scene. He only felt his temples throbbing. It was a dormitory, but the glass windows cracked from different angles. The heavy snow blew in from outside and extinguished the fireplace. The surrounding furniture was also broken into pieces. Even the bed was cut into pieces. It was impossible to tell what it originally looked like. It was a complete mess, worse than a dog's kennel. Fortunately, he had control over the system, so it only needed to be restored. However, there were some decorations that he brought back from the real world or from other dungeons that the system couldn't restore with a single click. Xianxia was so angry that he laughed. He unhurriedly rolled up his sleeves and decisively used his authority as a ruler. Demons from other parallel worlds needed to be taken care of? Sorry, Xianxia felt that this demon from the parallel world needed to be taught a lesson. If he didn't teach him a lesson, he would become a troublemaker. If he didn't teach him a lesson, he wouldn't be able to vent his anger. Therefore, in the next second, the demon who was jumping around happily with his golden eyes shining brighter and more excited was punched out. The magician's full strength sent him flying from this room to the black room. Cough, 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 Xianxia didn't hold back in this punch, so the impact was quite terrifying. At least on the surface, the demon's favorite bookshelf was overturned, and even the wine cabinet at the side was affected. A bottle of red wine that had been sealed for who knows how many years had a hole in it. The cold wine flowed out onto the front of the man's shirt, dyeing the white suit into a shocking red. The air was filled with the fragrance of wine. However, the demon sitting on the ground didn't notice this. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the easel at the side. Xianxia was speechless. Most of the demon's paintings were not proper. Compared to this, the painting that he altered the artist's ghost in the amusement park was the most normal one. For example, the parallel world demon was looking at the painting now. The magician was lifted up from behind, his white hair spread across the black floor. He looked lazy, his body covered in sweat and unknown liquid. In front of him was a huge full-length mirror. The cards attacked again. The demon had no choice but to give up looking at the painting. He rolled on the ground and started a new round of fierce battle. This time, his hands were twisted behind his back and he was stepped on by the magician. It was inconceivable that the culprit was actually a rose. By the way, this rose was taken from the demon's shirt pocket by Xianxia. The rose had already been used up, but the B612 rose in the other parallel world didn't. How do you know about it? Although he was at a disadvantage, the demon didn't change his nature and wanted to provoke the magician. Xianxia was about to speak when he heard a slight explosion in the air. The black-haired man who was inexplicably transferred to another parallel world, used future information to make a deal with the main system, and used the flower ring to locate him. It took a lot of effort to find this parallel world, and the black-haired man stepped out of the shadows. Seeing the scene in front of him, his tone suddenly became serious. "What are you doing? What are you doing?" The black-haired man's tone was low. The shadow behind him swam along with his shadow, brimming with an ominous luster. It wasn't just the scene in front of him. Behind him, the entire 2 rooms had turned into ruins. The blue and white room was the worst. One couldn't even tell what it originally looked like. The black room wasn't any better. The bookshelf and the wine rack were all smashed to the ground. Dark red wine could be seen everywhere on the floor. Anyone wouldn't be in a good mood to see their room in such a state. However, the devil only glanced at the mess indifferently. His gaze once again focused on magician who was pressing the parallel world's number 1 to the ground. Without a doubt, if it was anyone else in this situation, they would be caught red-handed. However, magician wasn't an ordinary person. The devil wasn't an ordinary person either. Even number 1 who was being pressed to the ground wasn't an ordinary person. However, this didn't stop the devil from finding the scene in front of him unbearable. Especially when he saw his other self licking his lips excitedly. His dark golden eyes shone with interest. He even pulled on a strand of magician's long silver hair provocatively and rubbed it between his fingers. It was his other self. How could he not know his own personality? It was obvious that he was interested in her. Not only was he interested, but he was also fearlessly asking for a battle. The devil snorted coldly. The shadow behind his black leather shoes started to move. He wanted to secretly fix magician on the black floor. However, it was obvious that number 1's ability was the same as his. Therefore, when the 2 of them gave opposite orders to the shadow that didn't have any intelligence was put in a difficult position. In the end, it chose not to listen to anyone and stayed on the spot. Since his move didn't work, he narrowed his eyes and stepped forward in the shadow. He intimately hugged magician's waist. "Dear, who is this?" He asked the obvious. Long ago in the other parallel world, the devil had already inquired about him from the main system. It was obvious that the thriller trainee competition hadn't even started yet. If it was defined according to the thriller trainee novel that Xianxia mentioned, it belonged to the stage where the story hadn't even started yet. "It's you from the parallel world who really needs to be educated." As Xianxia spoke, he relaxed his body and leaned back, lazily resting the back of his head on the devil's chest. One of his legs was still bent on number 1 on the ground, and he began to complain. "He destroyed our room." Clearly, the word "we" drew a clear line between them, dispelling the demon's gloomy mood. Magician's next sentence made him narrow his eyes. "By the way, he also dirted your painting." Xianxia pointed at the wine cabinet. Then the demon saw the oil painting with the black cloth lifted. On the originally flat canvas, in addition to the paint, there were also some traces of dark red wine. Of course, this was not the most important thing. Most importantly, the painting had been seen by someone other than them. He was extremely unhappy. After a round of watching them show off their love, the number one, this kind of atmosphere where the other party had formed their own circle and he couldn't get a word in was really terrible. Of course, it was even worse when the thing he was interested in was already marked as someone else's possession. Even if that person was his other self from the parallel world. No matter if it was the devil or number one, once they were interested in something, they would either snatch it back or forcefully possess it. There was no such thing as not being able to get it or not being able to get it. Of course, it was undeniable that this kind of possession made number one want to snatch it even more. Therefore, with the spirit of seeking death, number one continued on his path of appeasement, never to return. Heh. He suppressed the sourness in his heart and began to mock. How disappointing, I didn't expect you from the parallel world to be like this. What is this? A tamed dog? He does need to be taught a lesson. The devil's voice was low. Anyone with a discerning eye could hear the hint of displeasure in his voice. Baby, your hands are red from the beating. I don't need to trouble you with this kind of thing, let me do it. The man slowly showed the flower ring on his hand that was paired with magician's as he decisively used the infinite loop authority. No matter which world, the devil's strength was unquestionable. After all, it was an existence born from malice, the darling of the world's malice. The puppet line and the ability to manipulate shadows were enough to make him invincible. He could easily destroy an S-grade dungeon with a smile, it was as easy as blowing off dust. Since it was his other self from the parallel world, the devil was very clear about his own ability. If they had to fight head-on, there would be no clear winner. But, the devil in this world had something that number one didn't have. That was the infinite loop authority. Although as the big boss of an S-grade dungeon, many of the rules of the infinite loop couldn't restrict the devil, but it was enough to make number one suffer. The devil was never a person who cared about chivalry. Magician, who had just taught number one a lesson, also patted the non-existent dust on his body, leaned against the wall, and watched the two devils fight with great interest. Even if he was at an absolute disadvantage, number one didn't stop. He often took the opportunity to throw flirtatious glances at magician who was watching from the outside, eager to try the feeling of being cuckolded. Then, without a doubt, in the next second, he was pressed into the wall by the devil's puppet line. No wonder he was number one in the parallel world, he could accurately step on the devil's minefield every time. Xianxia watched while sighing insincerely in his heart. Good guy. Even the flirting and the way he poured oil on the fire were of the same origin. The two fought for a while before the devil finally noticed. As long as number one was here, magician would occasionally look at him. Even though it was just a glance, it was enough to make him unhappy. Most importantly, number one was constantly acting like a peacock trying to steal his woman. It was infuriating. In short, the devil finally realized that leaving number one alive was a disaster, so he stopped fighting. He simply opened a wormhole, tied number one up with puppet lines, and threw him in. Originally, he had discussed with the main system of the other parallel world. He would wait for the other party to contact him first before using the coordinates. This would consume the main system's energy. But now, the devil would rather use the energy he had accumulated to make this annoying guy go away first. Number one from the parallel world instantly surpassed the little devil's ranking in the devil's heart and took the throne of number one. Of course, before throwing number one away, the devil gave him a big gift full of malice. That was the memory of his sweet encounter with magician, referred to as killing each other, and their final love. Sour, it would be best if he died of sourness. On the other side, number one, who had been thrown into the wormhole and only had time to hide in the shadows, opened his eyes abruptly. What entered his eyes was a deep black, surrounded by countless strange decorations and furniture. The wine cabinet and bookshelf were silent in the distance. There was no easel, nor was there a connected blue and white room. Everything was unbelievably quiet. There was no doubt that this was his room. You're back, number one, the cold mechanical voice sounded in the air. After a long time, a lazy came from the room. The main system had put in a lot of effort to redeem number one. It was mainly because the devil from another parallel world had informed T3 that the main system of his world had successfully ascended to the higher dimension. After precise calculations, the main system felt that it was necessary to cooperate with number 1. Thus, it planned to spend its precious energy to bring this troublesome collaborator back from the parallel world. In the end, before its energy could be transmitted, number 1 was sent over by the other party. At the same time, he also told it to lock up its dog and not let it bite people. Then, he unilaterally closed the parallel world's channel forever. The main system was speechless. It, who had no human emotions, also felt what it meant to be despised by humans and detested by dogs at this moment. It did not know if it was an illusion, but since then, the main system felt that number 1 seemed to have become a little strange. For example, he suddenly asked it if it had detected any abnormalities of a high-dimensional existence descending from the infinite loop. After receiving a negative answer, he asked if there was an ordinary person with the surname Xianxia among the trainees randomly grabbed from the real world. In order to ensure that number 1's brain was not damaged after experiencing a parallel space migration, the main system began to observe him silently. After the start of the competition, number 1, who had said that he was not interested in playing as a dungeon NPC, accurately chose to enter the mental hospital one-man show dungeon and played as one of the crazy doctor NPCs. Other than the 2 S-class players, there was nothing special about this dungeon. However, the main system found that number 1 showed an unusual interest in one of the E-class trainees. However, soon, after seeing the white-haired trainee crying and failing to seduce Zhuge, and then failing to flatter the Messiah who was controlled by number 1, this little bit of interest quickly disappeared. What came next was fury. "You're not him." Number 1 grabbed the white-haired trainee's neck, his dark golden eyes filled with coldness. They clearly had the same face, the same hair color, and the same eye color, but their personalities were completely different. The other white-haired magician had a dazzling soul that even demons wanted to keep for themselves. However, the white-haired trainee in front of him had an empty shell. The soul inside was rotten, ugly, and vulgar. "Please. I beg you, don't kill me, I can do anything for you." Looking at the red-haired trainee who still wanted to please him, he only felt disgusted and disgusted. He did not want to look at him for a second longer. Number 1 had never been so furious. He did not know if he was affected. However, it was undeniable that the more he could not find him, the greater his desire for the white-haired magician. He also had an unstoppable interest in the future of the parallel world's demons and magicians. Next, everything went according to plan. There were a total of 10 S-class players, and other than number 3, the rest had all fallen. Without any suspense, number 1 controlled the puppet and obtained the final victory. Boring. Extremely boring, there was no thinking or anticipation to speak of. The competition that was originally filled with anticipation was now dull and boring. Standing on the final wishing platform that belonged to the victor, and receiving the burning gazes of all the survivors, number 1 asked the main system again. "You still haven't found him?" "No," the main system repeated this answer countless times. "Even if it's a parallel world, there are some differences, it's impossible to be completely the same. If you don't have anything else, make a wish, I'm preparing to ascend to the dimension. According to our deal and agreement, the infinite loop will be under your control." Being under his control did not sound like it, but what was the point of that? Number 1 sneered, and casually glanced at the people under his feet. Tens of thousands of people submitted to him, supreme and absolute rule. These were all things that he could easily obtain, meaningless. Jealousy, dissatisfaction, and emptiness were causing trouble. He was like a lonely devil, never to find the echo of his soul. Wait, there was another way. Just when the main system felt that it could not get a response, the man finally spoke. His eyes were shining, bright, but it made people unable to look at him directly. "Main system? When ascending to the dimension, do you mind bringing someone along?" The room was a mess. 2 years had passed since the car accident. From a high-spirited magician, he fell to the bottom of the valley. After getting hundreds of hopes that were cruelly taken away, he became an out-and-out misanthropic person. It seemed to be a matter of course. Magician slashed his wrist strenuously, his face was cold and expressionless. No matter if it was conventional physical methods, medical technology, surgery, or even metaphysics, black magic, legendary witchcraft, or even more unorthodox methods, he had tried them all, but none of them could restore his hands to their original state. He had tasted disappointment countless times. But magicians still held on to that tiny flame. Humans were like that, as long as they were alive, they would have the hope of overestimating themselves. The blood that gushed out dripped onto the black ritual cloth on the ground, and quickly gathered into a pool, dyeing the surroundings with a shocking color. It was normal for an ordinary person to feel dizzy or even faint when faced with such a sudden loss of blood. But Magician did not care. Even if he died from excessive blood loss, it did not matter. It did not matter anyway. Because this time, it was just a useless effort like the thousands of times before. In the dark room, Magician laughed self-deprecatingly, threw the knife aside, and was about to turn around with a tired voice. Just as he turned around, the parchment was suddenly covered by a black shadow, floating in the air as though it was burning out of thin air. There was a silent hurricane in the room, tearing everything apart. Looking at the figure walking out of the shadows, Magician's body trembled. The devil had responded to his summoning. "Are you Mephisto, who came from hell in response to my summoning?" Magician's voice trembled, like a blind man who had finally found a ray of light that belonged to him in the darkness. Grabbing onto the piece of driftwood, he was willing to indulge in it. Number one, who walked out of the shadows, looked at him deeply. The magician in front of him was much more gloomy, decadent, and indifferent than the magician in his memory. Even the color of his hair and eyes was different from the one in his memory. Instead, they were as dark as the Evernight continent. But number one knew that this was Magician who belonged to him. He belonged to him, and only him. "Mephisto? I like that name." The man smiled, and the shadow stopped the blood from gushing out from Magician's wrist. There was an unconcealable joy in the devil's smile. "Nice to meet you, my little magician." End of chapter 258. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the video to support the channel.